BG in the house. Welcome to the 70th edition of the Boxing Gossip podcast. Thanks to everyone who's joining. Can see a lot of the regulars in the chat already. Thanks to everyone for the support. Thanks to everyone who's joining. 17 of you hit the thumbs up before we've even gone live. That support makes all the difference. Loads to talk about in boxing. Obviously, I've been away for the past 2 weeks, so quite a lot to catch up upon. Some good boxing last week. I'm going to start with the likes of George Groves versus Chris Eubank Jr. We'll move it along at a rapid pace, and we'll get to one of the biggest stories in the sport at present, which has to be Anthony Joshua versus Carlos Takam, a late notice fight being made, as well as, of course, Dillian Whyte versus Robert Helenius, even, that's been made at late notice. We'll then fast forward on to next week, and we can talk, of course, about the debut of Joyce and some of the other boxing action which is going down. Before we get into it, I want to give a quick shout out, as always, to my man Jet. Regular viewers will know in the past 2 weeks in my absence, Jet has hosted a podcast on his channel, Boxing Discussions, which I'd strongly recommend you all subscribing to. And I know a lot of the regular viewers have really appreciated the fact that there's been something for him to take in. Something for you guys all to take in, and listen to in terms of podcast material. So Jet's on the panel tonight. I can see Irish Thomas joined. We're going to start with Jay, and we're going to start by taking a look back at last week's boxing, namely George Groves versus Jamie Cox. Jay, take it away.
Welcome back, BG. Good to see you. I hope you had a pleasant fight back. So Groves Cox, well, I think first of all, I think Cox was a little bit overwhelmed by this. He seemed to be rushing his work, whether that was a tactic or not. I think it's quite a big fight for him to step into. It was a big opportunity, and to be fair to him, he came out and he did give a good account of himself. You know, he came to fight. He came to bring the fight. I don't know whether that was nerves, enthusiasm, excitement, or whether that's pretty much just the way he fights. He goes at it 100%, and then hopefully, you know, he gets that knockout with that legendary knockout power that he supposedly has. He was left open quite a few times, as we saw when he got finished to the body, with good power by Groves, a good shot. I always like to see a body shot. I always like to see a fight end on a body shot. He was open a few times before that with that right hand. He was really going for that right hand. His corner were telling him to push that right hand. It must have been something that they worked on, but it left him open a hell of a lot. George Groves, I mean, he looked composed in there. I think he's come on a lot from that title win and the experiences of the Froch fight and the Badu Jack loss. And I think now he has psychologically, he may be on the decline physically as a boxer. Psychologically, he seems to be a lot more at home in there, a lot more confident. He handled the pressure quite well. He got caught a few times, but the power didn't really seem to bother him. His counter-punching was really spot on. His accuracy was really good. That's what impressed me most about George Groves. You do worry about that gas tank. I mean, he didn't have any respect, I don't think, for Cox right from the off. That's why he took the fight. That's why he knew he'd get it out the way first round. I think all of us pretty much said, and most people said, that Groves would be getting through this first round. So, I mean, all you can say is, like, Groves did well. He did what he had to do. Cox gave it a really good go with enthusiasm. And then, you know, it looks like the winner of Eubank Groves will be in my opinion, be the winner of the whole tournament.
Yeah, when I first watched the fight, Jay, I didn't think Groves looked overly composed. You know, I thought he looked hurried, and but actually, having watched the fight back a second time, less of Jamie Cox's work landed than I actually thought it would do. And George Groves, to his credit, actually did some decent work with his back to the ropes in terms of evading punches and countering, you know, which I thought was interesting. So I've always thought of George Groves as someone who's just been more of a long-range sniper, but I think he showed a little bit of a different dynamic here. And I look, Eubank is obviously a different level to Cox, but I do think that's potentially something worth considering going into that Eubank fight, because Eubank does charge in. And if Groves is the kind of guy who can lean back against the ropes, have a look, make him miss, and then counterpunch, you know, then it could be a factor. I mean, did you see that sort of stuff yourself? Was that something that you considered?
Yeah, I think I just said it's hard to look composed when you're being rushed. When you've got someone on top of you, a lot of punches and really pushing the fight and really coming forward. It's a very difficult skill to be able to keep some sort of composure and keep your timing. That takes a lot of skill. If you look at it for both ways in the sense of Eubank and Groves, Groves is fighting someone which is not at his level, I don't think. So he could work him out a lot easier. He's not going to get that against Eubank. He's obviously going to get more pressure. So you're going to see how he can really react to heavy sustained pressure. At the same time, Eubank's going to be fighting someone who has the skill to box off the back foot like he showed, and has that timing and that accuracy, and is of a different level to the opponent he faced, Yildirim, in the first round. So both fighters are stepping up, you know, a big step in the opponents that they previously had. I think, you know, I wasn't on the podcast after the Eubank Yildirim. Now, for me, there was a lot of hype that surrounded Eubank Jr. after, and it was very impressive. It was impressive, admittedly, but it's against, you have to look at who you're fighting. It's very easy to do sustained pressure like that when you've got someone standing right in front of you. And I've said it before, that's what Eubank likes. He likes, you know, if you look at the last 3 fights he's had, Abraham was not the half of the Abraham that he was. Will stand in front of you. Yildirim did exactly the same thing, and Quinlan was not a great fighter. So he can look very spectacular. I think this is a defining fight for Eubank. Maybe they've got, maybe they're very clever and they're leading up to this, and this is his defining fight where it will take him to a different level, which it will if he wins. And George Groves, maybe it's clever for him that he fought Jamie Cox, who would put on sustained pressure. So when they're going through camps, knowing who they've got to face after, they can work on certain things that will be successful tactics against both Cox and both Eubank. So it'll be a really interesting fight to see. Will Eubank be able to, seems to deal with pressure really well, so I don't think that's really going to be an issue for him. He seems to thrive on that pressure, on that big stage. But at the same time, you've got Groves, who's been there time and time again now. He's been in some very, very big fights. And for me, as I said, I feel like he's kind of lost that burden off his shoulders and now has that sense of calmness and confidence that possibly he only had before the Froch fight, Froch 1 or Froch 2, that he seemed to have lacked after those defeats when obviously Badu, Jack and etc. So, I mean, time will tell. But, you know, for Groves, he's almost a seasoned pro now. So it's whether that's going to be such a big factor in the fight. And we didn't see him, again, go past that 5 or 6, 7 rounds, get to those championship rounds where we know he can fade. But, you know, at the same time, Eubank throw a hell of a lot of punches. Can he sustain that sort of intensity for 12 rounds? So I think that going to the Eubank and Groves fight, the first 5 rounds are going to be so telling on how that fight's really going to go.
Yeah, and I guess there is a possibility that Eubank Jr. won't live with the power. I mean, my instinct tells me he will. My instinct tells me that Eubank Jr. has got a good chin. But I was discussing this with Tom the other day when we did a live show. Eubank Jr. has really taken one notable punch in his whole career, and it's come from Spike O'Sullivan, who's a much, much lower level. You know, Spike O'Sullivan's a guy who's talked about making light middleweight, and he's a kind of British level guy. Now he's going to be up against George Groves, who's a borderline light heavyweight. You know, and it's not impossible that Eubank won't have the punch resistance there. So I think that's a telling point in that fight. And it's one of the intriguing factors. Jay, final question I had for yourself, and it's a bit of a controversial question, but I think it's an interesting one. Were you surprised Jamie Cox didn't get up?
Because if you look at that punch, it was right in the centre of the side. Usually when a body punch comes in, it tends to come around the sides towards the kidneys, either side, but it came right up in the middle. And anyone knows, if you've been hit like that, no matter if your head's straight, no matter if the rest, your intelligence or or your will to get up is working, your body just will not let you. And unfortunately, I think Jamie Cox would definitely have got up if he could have, because there's too much at stake. This was a massive opportunity to Jamie Cox. Gone to the next round, it propels him again. Now he's sort of left to go back to a Rocky Fielding or something like that, of that sort of ilk. Maybe he wasn't ready for it. Maybe he's just not good enough. But I think any fighter in those situations, with the way this tournament is and the possibilities of knowing what's ahead of you, I think would give you that extra motivation to get up. And I think once you get hit in that part of your body, it's good night, Vienna.
Fair play. Well, it certainly was for Jamie Cox, and yeah, I guess that can be night when it happens. But no, cheers for that, Jay. Over 110 of you watching live. Really pleased to have so many people joining in nice and early. If you want to support, as always, hit the thumbs up button, which means this will get more visibility and will mean that hopefully more new people can join the channel, which, as always, is fantastic. Let's go over and bring Jet in. Jet, obviously, you're hearing myself and Jay discussing that fight. Give us your take on how George Groves looked, first and foremost.
Yeah, not too dissimilar to how you guys kind of played it out. He looked, composed, comfortable at times, but then he looked uncomfortable at times. I think obviously Jamie Cox, he had pressure, but maybe the pressure wasn't as clean as we saw it maybe on first glance. So you have to kind of look at it maybe at a second time. It was fairly decent for how long it lasted, 4 rounds. And George Groves obviously continues to the semi-finals. Yeah, he looked good. Obviously, we don't know about his gas tank. His last 2 fights haven't gone past 6 rounds, so it's difficult to tell. But from the weigh-in, I could tell he was weight drained. If that goes past 6-7 rounds, I think he's done. So if Eubank can take his shots early, I think Eubank has a good chance in winning the semi-final fight. But George Groves has serious power in both hands. Don't get me wrong. A good jab. He showed some tricks in up close against Cox. Obviously, Cox is not the operator that Eubank is, as you guys have said. And yeah, it should be a good fight.
That, mate. I think Eubank's better than Cox. Yeah. Eubank is a bit off balance. He does have a tendency to flail in and swing in. Like, I haven't actually seen this side to George Groves before, where he's back to his ropes and trying to ride punches and counter. Could that? I mean, we're speculating here. We're talking theoretically, but could that be a difference maker?
Yeah, I mean, it could do. It depends. Eubank, his footwork isn't necessarily great. Let's put it that way. But he throws punches in bunches, and the guy doesn't stop throwing punches. And George Groves to throw back at that sort of rate is difficult at best. It's difficult for me to see him throwing back the amount that Eubank's gonna be throwing at him. Whether or not he will land on him, that's different. But George Groves looks very he looks a lot cuter, let's put it that way. He looks a lot smarter. I think he's added some Shane McGuigan has added some new tools to his arsenal, so to speak. And he looks like a real veteran in there. He looks like he knows what he's doing. He maybe allows himself to get backed up, or he allowed himself to get backed up against Jamie Cox because he knew, he could ride the punches. He could, dig in a little uppercut here and there. He's a smart fighter when he wants to be. I think, ever since as Jay was saying, the first Froch fight, I think he's kind of, not had that, not elusiveness, but he's never had that consistency to his boxing throughout the duration of a fight. It's always been he takes rounds off, and he's kind of always been that fighter. But it's been more so evident after the first Froch fight or the second Froch fight even. So, I mean, it's a really good fight. Don't get me wrong. It's a 50-50 fight against Eubank. He looked good against Cox. Obviously, Cox, as we've said a few times already, isn't the level of a Eubank. But he definitely looks a lot cuter. He looks a lot smarter. And maybe tactically, Shane McGuigan might be able to get it right on the night, come January, February time in that Eubank fight.
Yeah, definitely. As for Jamie Cox, interesting comment for me. In the post-fight press conference, he acknowledged that he wasn't a big super middleweight, but said that he couldn't make 160 and that he wanted to stay at 168 and presumably, have some of the big domestic fights that are available in that division. I saw an interview with Eddie Hearn, may have been on IFL TV, where he said that he wanted Cox to get a new team, new nutritionist, dietitian, that sort of thing, and make 160. Do you have a take on that?
Yeah, I saw that video on IFL. It was about 25 minutes long. He talked about Jamie Cox. He said he gave it a good effort. I've always said I think he's a 160 guy. I don't think he's a 168. A fighter. He's just too small. There are guys obviously cutting down from light heavy and coming down. If you put him in, George Groves is a big super middleweight. Put him in with Callum Smith. Callum Smith would tower over him. Gilberto Ramirez tower over him. David Benavidez. Those sort of guys. Just don't think he's a 168 fighter. That being said, there are fights out there that I think are winnable for him. He showed, if he puts some pressure on, I think if he can get a team that puts educated pressure together and he doesn't go completely gung-ho, kind of how he did against Groves, I think he could be a handful. He did show some good spots to his game, and I think he can come again. But 168, the fighters are out there. Rocky Fielding, I think that'd be a decent fight for him. John Ryder, that'd be a good fight for him. John Ryder isn't the biggest super middleweight. Had a good win, in sort of the last week or two. So there are fights there there are fights there for him, but I'd like to see him at 160 if he can get down. And obviously Eddie Hearn's pushing for it. So let's see if he does go down. He could be a bit of a problem domestically, at least at 160. Yeah,
no, I agree. And both of those divisions have live title scenes, certainly around the 160. You raised it. I was just going to ask you for a quick word on John Ryder. John Ryder, historically, is one of my least favourite fighters to watch, but I'm going to be honest and say in the last year, he's made a fan of me. He's really improved, and I'm impressed by him. What was your take?
Yeah, he did fairly well. I thought he won against Rocky Fielding, to be fair. I scored that to Ryder just. It was a close fight, but I had Ryder winning. And he seems to be one of those fighters. I think he's kind of stuck in between a weight class. He obviously can't make 160 anymore. He's moved up to 168, but I think he's a bit small for 168, similar to Jamie Cox. But he's had a few good performances, and obviously it's probably the weight drain. The weight cut was, a bit heavy on him, I guess. Obviously coming towards the latter stage of his career. And I'd like to see him get a shot at least the British title, if not a possible European title shot. He's done fairly well for himself, and I hope he can make a few quid and win a decent title on the way as well. He's done fairly well, so yeah, kudos to John Ryder.
Wicked stuff. All right, cheers, Jet. We'll bring you back in just a second. Tom, let's do a quick sound check. Tom, how you doing?
Hiya, can you hear me?
Tom, that is the best you've ever sounded.
Thank you. I've been working on my voice.
You usually take a good couple of attempts to sort of warm up to being remotely audible, but fair play to you. So Tom and I went live after the Groves Eubank fight, and we discussed that in some detail. Tom, I've watched the fight back. Actually got a slightly different opinion second time round, giving a bit more credit to Groves, actually. Have you, has your opinion changed at all?
Yeah, I think I watched it again. I thought Groves did a bit better. but I still just don't like the look of him when he's rushed.
Mm.
And I think Eubank likes to be on the inside, and Groves doesn't like somebody on the inside. And I think somebody on the chat there, I think it was Team Groves, said they watched back Groves versus De Gale, which I actually did there yesterday. And De Gale or Groves is much more comfortable being put under pressure then. You know, he'd spin off. I think somebody said in the chat, he would spin off when he'd be cornered well and stuff. And he doesn't do that anymore. He just kind of lies there on the ropes and tries to counterpunch off them, which I don't know if they're worried. Is that a way of somehow trying to preserve his legs or something? But, you know, I just think that that's not the style for Eubank. And then I feel like, you know, I've been listening to a few podcasts and a lot of people think it's 50-50. I don't see it a 50-50 fight at all. I think it's like a 3-1 fight in Eubank's favour. But my money's down, and I can't wait. It's probably the best fight in British boxing that we have to look for.
Yeah, I mean, certainly in terms of all British fights, it would have to be, wouldn't it? We did discuss the betting odds, Tom, when we last spoke. I believe that their prices have actually held, and you can still get a bit of 5-6 on Chris Eubank Jr. So I presume that's the bet you've taken, is it?
Yeah, Sky bet at 5-6. So, you know, I just think that's great value. I think it's a very bad match for stylistically and just where they are in their careers for George Groves. You know, I just think it's like exactly the wrong type of fighter. I think Groves would have a much better chance against De Gale than Eubank. I think he'd have probably a better chance maybe against Benavidez. I just think you know, it's all wrong for him. I just don't understand why people think it's a 50-50 fight. You know, There's only one thing worse than a shaved pig, and that's hairy bacon.
Not for the first time. I'm left stuttering at my screen, but there you go. You certainly got some likes for your comment on George Groves there the other day, definitely. Tom, Jamie Cox, one of your favourite fighters. Let's switch and talk about one of your other favourite fighters, I'm afraid. Not a good week if you're one of the Irish Tom favourites, especially in the light middleweight division. A pretty brutal knockout, Tom. I guess in a way it's hard to analyse it because it was over so quickly, but what was your take on that fight?
The boy got caught with a shot. What can you say? He got crippled. You know, it's very, you know, like, you know, fighters, this happens to fighters sometimes and they come back. So I don't think it's like wipeout for his career. Like, just look and say Andre Ward nearly got beaten by, what's his name?
Darnell Boone.
Darnell Boone. Kovalev nearly got beaten by Darnell Boone. What do you call him? Adonis Stevenson got sparked by Darnell Boone. You know, Kell Brook nearly got beaten by, and probably just, I don't know, very close. Could have deserved to lose against Carson Jones. You know, there's a lot of guys that have suffered bad ones. You know, and just getting caught with one punch, it's not the end of the world. Look, it can happen to fighters. We'll see if he comes back from it. But he has got a load of natural talent. He's one of the most, you know, he was the American Prospect of the Year last year. So I wasn't the only loser. There was a lot of other people losing, but unfortunately I lost money as well. That's the worst of it. You know, between Hughie Fury and Badu and Lubin, who else? I've been on a run of all my prospects getting sparked. It's not good.
Yeah, I mean, David Benavidez is the one that you've picked. I mean, your two fighters who have remained successful are Benavidez and Gervonta Davis. But whilst they've got W's, they both really took, you know, Benavidez looked pretty average. And, you know, Gervonta Davis, did he lose his belt on the scales, if I'm not mistaken? So, yeah, you are having a little bit of a run on it. Did you see any of the other light middleweight fights? Erislandy Lara, Jarrett Hurd versus Austin Trout?
Yeah, no, I did see them all. I've literally seen every bit of boxing this weekend.
Okay.
I don't know. I woke up Sunday morning with labyrinthitis. Does anybody know what that is?
I don't, mate.
It's like when you have a David Bowie film stuck in your ears. But that's an obscure reference. I don't know who'll get it. Who's old enough? Jay might be old enough for that one.
Boom, boom. Was that a gag?
It was supposed to be a gag. It was more like a gag order than a gag.
Okay, yeah.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the Jared Hurd fight versus Austin Trout was a fucking brilliant fight. I don't know if anybody saw that. To me, that's up there for nearly fight of the year. I thought Trout put it on the line. Jared Hurd is one tough mother, and that was just an all-action 10 round. Margarito versus Cotto type fight. Absolutely brilliant fight. Hurd is enormous for the weight. He's as tough as nails. He can be crude, and then he can be not so crude. He's a kind of a strange one. He's got an engine from heaven. Like, I'm a big fan of Jared Hurd after that. I would really want to see Jared Hurd against Charlo. I really hope that fight gets made. What is the other one? I watched the Lara fight as well. I don't know. Everybody's slagging off the Lara fight. I don't actually think it was that bad. I think people just, a lot of people don't like Cuban fighters. That's the way I look at it. Rigondo gets untold slagging. So does Lara. Compare the two boys. Compare them to Floyd's style of fighting. They're just as exciting as Floyd. Yet Floyd is an all-time great, and these guys get called bums. It just grates with me. It's more to do with politics than boxing. Lara is still a top class 154 pounder. He give Andem a hard go.
Yeah, who would you say is the number one at 154 right now?
I don't think there's a clear number one. I think if they all who are the top ones now? We'd have Lara.
It would have to be Lara, or Charlo's an odd one to weigh up because he looked pretty poor against John Jackson, but won. He looked very poor. I watched him fight Vanez Martirosyan, and that was a fight that really could have gone either way. And he's almost wiped out Erickson Lubin too early, in a sense that, in a weird way, he doesn't get a huge amount of credit for it because it's just put down as getting caught cold. So he's kind of hard to weigh up. I would say, for me, you'd probably say Lara is there or thereabout. Boxrec still have Miguel Cotto, Jared Hurd. Boxrec have Demetrius Andrade, although I understand his days are done. And then you've got some weird names. You've got guys like Liam Smith, Cornelius Canine Bundreds, Austin Trout, Julian Williams, those sort of guys.
Well, look, Lara got beaten up by Angulo. Now, to me, Hurd is a better boxer, a better come forward fighter than Angulo. So I think he has the style and the engine to give Lara all sorts of trouble. Lara, Canelo went on the front foot against Lara, and Lara didn't like it on the back. Didn't like it when someone came onto him with power. So I think, people will slag Hurd because he's kind of agricultural, but he got great athletic capabilities. Angulo is an agricultural fighter if ever there was one, and he beat Lara. So styles make fights. So I wouldn't be surprised if Lara bet Charlo, Charlo bet Hurd and Hurd bet Lara. I think there's some good fights to be made.
It's really competitive, isn't it? Is not much in it at the top.
Well, it's hard to know because none of them have fought each other, you see.
Yeah.
The 154 division has been, and Cotto's in there in the mix as well. You have to put Cotto in the mix. So,
he's definitely retiring, isn't he, after his next fight?
Yeah, well, whatever. But, if we were to pick a Super 8 to do it, Cotto would be in there. And I don't know if he'd be a seed, but he'd probably be 4th or 5th.
Yeah. No, I agree. All right. Cheers, Tom. Thanks for that, mate. Let's bring Jay back in. Jay, where do you stand on these light middleweights?
Like Tom, I really like Hurd. He's a really strange player that he almost looks like when he hits even like the first and second, third round, he looks like he's in the championship rounds and he's got nothing left in like 10th, 11th round. He has this like really kind of lethargic way, but he's got these really long arms and a really good reach, and he'll switch, to go forward from left to right, and he misses a bit, but I don't know. I think he relies a little bit too much on that reach. He hasn't got masses of speed, but I think it's deceptive how quick he is. I mean, he looks really slow at times, but I don't think he's as slow as he possibly looks, if that makes any sense. I think Trout did really well the first 5 rounds. Boxed unusually, a lot of combinations, a lot of moving, and kind of outwitted Hurd a lot of the opening rounds. But I think the gas tank started to empty, and that's when Hurd could really start to take over. But I like Hurd. I like to watch him. I think I read somewhere that Trout threw 200 punches after 3 rounds, which is a lot for him. And I think that really told. And he took some heavy shots. I mean, they both did, but he really did take some heavy shots. So the best in the division, I think Hurd's definitely up there. Jamal Charlo is a strange one, because all of a sudden he's got this knockout power from somewhere. His last 3 or 4, he's had knockouts. So, and then obviously Cotto's going to finish, but like Tom said, Cotto would be, 4th, 5th seed, I'd say. Andrade was, the one with the immense talent, but he's been out a while. So Lara, I didn't watch the Lara fight, so I can't really comment on that. But for me, I think probably Lara's probably the number one in that division. And then you go from there to Charlo, Hurd, and even Trout had been out for a year. Remember, he'd been out for a long time, and I think maybe that had told a bit. But he was really competitive those first 5 or 6 rounds, and then, as I said, the gas tank seats are empty.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I need to have another look at that fight, because I've only seen clips of it. But it's a very competitive division, and one that could potentially generate some real interest if the guys square off against each other. I think the comment that Tom made about, if they were to do a Super 8 tournament, that's the kind of thing that could add real value to sort of help make these fights, I guess.
The thing, though, I think Hurd will that was a really good fight, as Tom said. It was really good, and a real good one to watch. And I think he'll have an interesting fight with anyone he fights, really, because just the way he fights. I think probably I'd like to see the Charlo against him. I think it's hard to say because of that early finish over Lubin. A lot was said around Lubin being something quite special, but again, I have to agree, he got caught really cold early. He got hit with a right hand early in the round, which you can kind of see shook him a little bit. You didn't see it really physically, but if you watch it closely, it kind of hit him to the core a little bit, and and he just got caught cold on that. So a Charlo Hurd fight would be really interesting. For me personally, I'd take Charlo for that, because I think Hurd is tough, really tough, but he's very open to be hit.
It's interesting with Lubin. So Lubin's kind of been like that in terms of the online boxing community for some time. I listened to a few of the US shows, and he was really deemed to be like a very special talent, which he still may be. But Jay, we've seen before, and I'm not saying Lubin's David Price, but we've seen before, a fighter gets caught. It happened with Amir Khan, happened with David Price, and that one punch completely changes the course of their career. Whether it's that it exposes a vulnerability which makes their opponents more confident against them, whether it's that it's so psychologically damaging it changes the way they fight. Is it possible that one punch that Lubin took that stopped him, could effectively be the defining moment of his career, as negative as that sounds?
I think there is always a possibility. It just really depends on the mentality of a fighter. It's like going back to George Groves. George Groves got horrifically knocked out in front of 80,000 people in one of the biggest fights ever in British boxing. To come back psychologically after that takes a hell of a strong mindset. Now, I'm not saying that's really on the scale of what we saw at the weekend, but it's like anything in life. If you get knocked in your job, or you get let down, or you don't perform how well as you should do, it can play in your mind, and it takes a very strong, confident person to come back and believe that you can get to the level that you thought you could do for that event. It's like Broner. Broner. I don't think he's ever really recovered after Madonna. Do you know what I mean? I think that took a lot out of him. There was a bit of humiliation there. And if you're a fighter that lives off confidence, and lives, and is forging your career through your own self-belief, then it can have a knock-on effect for the rest of your career, regardless of whether you've got an iffy chin or not. You get hit, it's always going to go. Going, but in your own life, if you have a car crash, every time you drive down, I've had a horrific car crashes, and after that, and it was in the wet, and after that, when I drove in the wet, I was always really second guessing myself about driving in the wet for years until you sort of get over it, so it's down to the person, it's down to the team around him.
Jay, that's only because you're a total loser.
Well, this I do know, and I've accepted the facts, and I'm allowed to move on with that now. So, I've accepted that I'm a loser, and I can move on happily.
I like it.
I'll never be the same driver again.
Jay takes the time to give a sort of deep insight into a personal experience of his life. He devastatingly got into
maybe that's a cutie shut up. I don't know.
I don't know. Jay, before we move to Jet, any word from yourself on the Matchroom Next Gen show?
I only watched one fight, and that was Ted Cheeseman. And I really like Ted Cheeseman. I think he's a good fighter. Shouldn't be fighting on those cards as far as I'm concerned. Not when you get like Conor Benn fighting on co-main eventing for big fights. We obviously know why, because it's his dad's name and the views that he brings. But for me, Ted Cheeseman look really good. He's a really polished, good fighter, and needs to be progressed, and not on those silly shows that I'm trying. After the last one, I tried to avoid as much as possible, but I'd heard good things, so I won't watch his fight, and I won't watch the rest of them. Apart from, I heard on the podcast somewhere else that I won't name about some Nigerian kid out, and he's a student or something, doing a master's, and he's given up his master's for 4 years to get into professional boxing, and his family don't even know that he's a fighter, and he was on Sky Sports Live Next Gen show. And
why won't you mention the fighter's name? Why won't you mention his name?
No, I wouldn't mention the podcast name that I heard it on, but I think the guy's name's Lake. Nathan Lake, is it Lake? Like,
so you're mentioning it now, and you wouldn't mention it there a minute ago.
Listen, I wouldn't mention the podcast name.
Yeah, but what about the fighter's name? Why wouldn't you mention his?
I didn't say I wouldn't. I said I wouldn't mention the podcast name.
I don't get it. Why wouldn't you mention the guy's name?
Shut up.
I think it's fucking. If anyone knows who that kid is, drop his name.
Irish, put down the potching.
Oh god.
Let's Jay, what about Cheeseman versus the Pig? Who wins?
Oh, you gotta look, haven't you? But Cheeseman for me. Pig's tough as fuck, but yeah, Cheeseman's just a better boxer, isn't he, all around? But I love the Pig.
Yeah.
Everyone loves the Pig.
Yeah, I'm on Cheeseman for that one if it happens, but probably won't. Jet, let's bring yourself back in, pal. Obviously, let's go over to the light middleweights, and let me ask you: you're a student of the game. let's start with Mr. Charlo, the light middleweight Charlo. Is he a hard fighter to assess? Is he potentially a very underrated fighter? You know, has he actually done quite a lot that's gone unnoticed now?
It's a weird one with Jamal Charlo. You know, I don't know where to put him in the sort of rankings, but you know, he's a good fighter. Don't get me wrong. He's a competent fighter. But I saw the fight that you were talking about against Martirosyan, and I thought he lost that fight as well. Very, very close fight, but I thought Varnes just nicked that. You know, obviously he struggled a lot against John Jackson. I know Andy Lee actually beat John Jackson with you know, he knocked him out cold, I think. So you know, John Jackson, his game has, you know, his game has, and he's tough as nails. But you know, if you really got people were talking about him and his twin brother. Obviously, his twin brother's moved up to 160. And they were saying, you know, he's the better boxer of the two. But I didn't see that because I saw Jamal Charlo, the big punching one. He was, you know, he was doing a fairly good job against Austin Trout. And, you know, he was boxing him well at times in that fight. So I thought, you know, Jamal, you know, I don't... He's not at the top of the division by virtue because he's, you know, obviously got a belt and he's got a few wins over credible names. But for me, he's not the fighter that people think he is. I think, you know, that's the best way. That's the best sort of way to sum him up. He's not the fighter that people think he is. He's a good fighter. He's not, you know, he's not an elite fighter. He's a solid fighter, but just he's not elite. I think he'd probably struggle against Jarrett Hurd. You know, obviously Jay and Irish are a bit higher on Jarrett Hurd than me. I think, you know, Jarrett Hurd is there to be beat by, you know, if Kell Brook was a bit bigger, I think Kell Brook would give him serious problems at 154, but I think he's too small. So, I'd advise Kell to step 147. But, you know, Jarrett Hurd is, you know, basic, but he would give him a lot of problems, Charlo. You know, Charlo is there to be hit. His fundamentals are questionable. His power, obviously, I don't know where his powers come from. But you look at his last few opponents, Charles Hatley hadn't fought in about 22 months, 21 months. So maybe that was a knockout waiting to happen. Erickson Lubin, very, very untested at this level. You know, maybe a stoppage was in Charlo's favour was you know, the smart bet. But yeah, he's a bit of a difficult fight to weigh up. He had a good win, obviously, against a semi-credible win against John Jackson after struggling a lot, and you know, a credible win, albeit tainted, against Martirosyan. So difficult fight to assess. Decent fighter. I think if he comes up against Erislandy Lara or Jarrett Hurd, he'd struggle a lot. Maybe the power, I don't know if you guys heard it, he said his aggressive approach has come because he's been sparring Spence in the gym. So maybe that's why he's been coming forward a little bit more and negating his boxing skills.
Yeah. Where do you stand on ranking that division, Jet? I mean, we were just discussing there that some of them are a bit of a muchness in terms of form. Do you have a sort of a clear preference?
Not necessarily. I'd probably say Lara just due to but you know, the number one in that division, there isn't really a clear-cut number one. I mean, I think the number one was Charlo's brother, the big punching Charlo, who's just moved to 160, and he beat Highland recently. I think he was the best in the division, to be honest. Obviously, he's moved up and it's left a bit of a hole there. Obviously, Lara's there, Cotto's there, he's fighting Saddam Ali. Charlo's there, Lubin might come back in the mix, Julian Williams is there. You know, there's a few other European level guys there. You know, it's difficult to assess that division. There's the way I'd assess it is there's a lot of good boxers in the division. It's a very, you know, it's not a strong division. It's got a bit thinner over the years. Obviously, Demetrius Andre's moved up to 160 as well. Charlo's moved up to 160. And there's a few others that have been floating about. But, you know, they don't really have any name value as well. So, yeah, difficult to assess, but none of them are box office attraction, bar maybe Cotto. I'd say he's the only guy that would rake in numbers. Probably just Lara just due to longevity, but there are some other solid fighters there, as I said, Hurd, Charlo, and a couple others as well. So let's see how the division progresses in the future. Hopefully you get some young guns coming through as well.
100%, 100%. Let's talk about next gen, Jet. Did you actually watch the fight?
Maybe two. It was Conor Ben on the card. I didn't see him.
I actually watched the bill, mate. Yes, I missed out.
Yeah, I only watched the Cheeseman fight and the Reece Bellotti fight properly. Reece Bellotti looks good. The only problem with him, I'd say, he loads up on his punches a bit too much. I think is he trained by Jim McDonnell? I think. So yeah, good trainer if he is. Correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. And yeah, Ted Cheeseman's very competent. I think he's a very, very solid operator, and I agree with Jay. He shouldn't be on these cards. Maybe it's because he doesn't, he's not the most media-friendly guy, but he certainly has some skills that you can work with and improve. And I think he can be a fairly solid fighter at 154. Whether or not he'll make it to world level, that's another story. But very, very good fighter. Him and Bellotti. Bellotti is obviously at featherweight. I think they're both very good fighters, and they, have scope to improve as well.
Good stuff. Good stuff. It's there's a few prospects on there that will come through. I just wonder if a lot of the guys like Cheeseman and Chamberlain, these guys who are clearly talented, I just wonder if they're not getting the exposure to ever. The problem is, how do you, unless you're like a Conor Ben or a Lawrence Okoli, how do you graduate from next gen to the big matchroom bills? Because one thing I think that has become clear is that at present you have fighters who fight on the undercards of pay-per-views, which would be like a Dillian Whyte and like a Joe Cordina maybe, and then you'll have fighters who fight on next gen like Chamberlain and Cheeseman, and then you've got a few in between like a sort of Crawler and a Burns, but it's kind of hard to. Unless you're like a Conor Ben, it's kind of hard to bridge that gap. So how do guys like Cheeseman and Chamberlain get off those next-gen bills, Jet?
They just join Joe Gallagher's gym. That'll do it.
And there's Irish for you.
Yeah, sorry. I was not in a muggy way. I was trying to compute how Jet had just developed an Irish accent. It's why I was sort of like, it took me about 1.5 seconds there to compute.
His uncle Seamus has been teaching him.
Yeah.
And there it is, my uncle Seamus. I mean, it's difficult. It's tough to assess because, as you said, obviously they kind of they're not able to graduate properly from next gen to the normal shows, and it's a shame because Cheeseman, Chamberlain, a few other fighters they're really, really good fighters. They're solid fighters to watch. They've got good skills. There's other fighters that might be they just might have a bit of a tear up and they're not on next gen. They should put them on the normal bills, but I think obviously Eddie has his favorites, the guys who make him money. I think that as it is, it's a business. Boxing is a business. That's the bad side of boxing, I guess. You have to look at the financial side more so even than the the fighting side. And they kind of look at it and say, who makes Eddie's going to go? Who makes us the most money? Okay, Dillian Whyte, Katie Taylor, those sort of guys who have name value. The fans buy into. Ted Cheeseman, very very, very good fighter, very solid fighter, but no one's going to go, Ted Cheeseman, I'm going to pay 60 quid, 100 quid for him on StubHub. No, that's the problem nowadays. I think it's the people that make him money. If you look at someone like, I know they're in different weight classes, but Ted Cheeseman or Rocky Fielding, Ted Cheeseman is technically a better fighter, but he's never going to get to the level of a Rocky Fielding because Rocky Fielding is obviously from Liverpool. He sells, it's just how the game works, and it's a problem. I don't think it's ever going to be fixed. Probably Frank has his best fighters at hand as well, and obviously puts them on his bigger bills and puts the other guys on your core bills, like Boy Jones Jr. and that sort of stuff. He's always on the your core bills. So it's always a business. It's just going to happen, and it's difficult to avoid. That's the only problem.
Interesting you say that, actually, because like my instinct was that Ted Cheeseman, I believe he's very young, but I would hope that Ted Cheeseman would go above and beyond a Rocky Fielding. But then I guess, Fielding's in a bit of a glamour division. There's the opportunity to match him up with domestic names. You can't really do that so much at 154, can you? Because the biggest domestic names are with Frack, so it's kind of hard to make the fights. But so I'd hope you're wrong, Jack. But
so you're looking at Pickford.
Maybe right.
You're looking at Pickford, Williams, and Smith having a rematch. Obviously, Gary Corcoran's moved back down to welterweight. He's fighting Jeff Horn next. There's very limited options there for someone like Ted Cheeseman. So he's going to have to move up, to European level. And obviously, when you bridge the gap, he's a very talented fighter, don't get me wrong. But sometimes you need those fights in between, sort of British and Commonwealth, and then you go to European. That's kind of the standard route. And then it's tough. And, he's not getting the exposure as it is. So, I do hope, as you said, I do hope he gets the fights that he probably deserves, and he gets the money that he, should earn, because boxers nowadays, obviously, some boxers go throughout their whole career. And we've seen it with Pulev pulling out. He's pulled out on £5 million, cash in, I guess. But it happens nowadays. Boxing is more with the financials than just the fighting. So I guess it's just the, it's just a necessary evil, I guess, that we have to accept in boxing. That's the only problem.
I hear you. Okay, guys. We've done best part of an hour on last week's boxing. Still quite a lot to talk about. Perhaps the biggest story of the week to come in the news section. Before I move it on, speak now or forever hold your peace. Does anyone have any more comments relating to last week's boxing? Indeed. Okay, let's move it on. Irish Tom, huge news, mate. I was flying. I landed. I opened up my phone. My Twitter had exploded. I thought, oh no, something's happened. Go on my Twitter. I scrolled down to the first tweets. So the tweets I'd received 3 or 4 hours earlier were saying Pulev had pulled out. I started scrolling up. About 2 hours before I landed, there were heavy rumours that that Joshua was going to be fighting Kevin Johnson. And then about an hour before I landed, confirmation of Takam versus Joshua. Iris, give us your take on this fight, mate.
I don't mind it. I think it's good, business by Eddie. I assume the amount of money he could lose by having not a decent opponent being able to substitute in would be huge. So I just assume he's paid 50 grand to tack him in the back to make him train and to be able to fill in just in case. So I don't have a problem with it I think it's a very good replacement. He's not much worse than Pulev. It could be stylistically, who knows, it might be tricky. He's a tough guy. I don't have too many problems. A lot of hardcores are giving elbow, but what the hell can you do? It's boxing. It's a pretty damn good replacement. And I think it's his mandatory.
It is. It
qualifies as doing his mandatory. So that means they can go for big fights and you don't have to see Pulev in the fucking summer. Oh my God. So I think it's good business by Eddie Hearn. All the times that Frank Warren has cancelled cards, got to give it to Eddie. He doesn't cancel cards. Although sometimes he probably should have, like the Chris Eubank versus, what was your man? Tony
Jeter.
Tony Jeter headliner, which is one of the worst.
Guys. This is an exclusive on the BG podcast. Irish Tom has stuck up for Eddie Hearn. Yeah. Never thought I'd see the day.
I do. I slag him where I think he deserves a slagging, but I'll give him the credit where he's he's doing something good, and I think that's a reasonable thing. I just can't have any. I just don't see what the problem is there. I don't have a problem with it. It'll be interesting. You haven't seen him against a good small man.
Do you believe Takam has had notice, or do you believe that's a lie?
No, I think I would look. Eddie's a smart guy. That fight will be worth how many millions to Matchroom?
Yeah,
and 50 grand thrown to a guy who's probably training for another fight. I think supposed to be anyway. 50 grand, and you can guarantee you've got a replacement in there.
Eddie did
You
say
know,
on,
on top of it.
on that same video that we were talking about earlier, BG, that he made a deal with Takam's team when the Pulev fight was made, that if Pulev did pull out of the fight, that Takam would come in, and if he didn't fight and the Pulev and Joshua fight went ahead, that he would be on the Monaco bill. So I guess it works out. Yeah, I guess it works.
Yeah. It just makes sense. Like, if you think about how much money are Matchroom going to make out of it, that'll probably end up grossing like 20 million or something like that. And Matchroom will take a 10 or 15, 20% cut or whatever it's going to be. They'll probably be, you know, if they spend $50,000 on insurance and they're making £2 million profit, you know, it's just a no-brainer. And, you know, it's a decent fight. You know, I prefer it to the Dillian Whyte fight, to be honest with you. Because we've seen the Dillian one before, and we don't rate Dillian, and I think most of us would take Takam to beat Dillian, so it's a better fight.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you, and I don't disagree for what it's worth. I think let's talk about the styles a bit, Tom. Joshua, I'm not saying Takam is a world beater. We kind of know who Takam is at this stage of his career. He's a guy we know where he stands. Do you think it's fair to say that Anthony Joshua has never fought someone with the style of a Carlos Takam? I mean, he's just come off a Klitschko fight. He was preparing for a Pulev fight. He's been sparring the likes of Helenius. I know Joshua is probably a level above Takam, but is this something new for him in terms of the style?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I haven't seen Takam against a big, tall guy. I don't know. Is anybody else?
No, I've seen him fight Perez, Povetkin, Parker. Yeah, so probably not the tall guy, no.
Yeah, and Parker. So they're all small guys, or not big heavyweights. So he's not going to be able to be bust up on the end of a long jab. But there's a good chance that, you know, he's a tough guy, but it could be a kind of a... Well, I don't know. We'll see. AJ, in any fight, he'll always put his foot to the floor at some stage to see if he can knock a guy out. And if he's not able to, and Takam is tough. We all kind of think Takam is tough. You know, Parker nearly got him out of there. So, you know, if Parker's nearly able to get them out of there, I think AJ hits a lot harder and is more dynamic. So,
did Parker nearly get him out of there? I don't remember that.
He did, yeah. Parker rocked him bad and put about a 30-shot combo in about the 8th or 9th round. You know, and he really hurt him. It was like Parker thought he had him enough that he was going to stop him. You know, and then Parker was gassed for a round or two after it. But, you know, I think that, you know, if he could just be dominated on the jab. It could be like a Lennox Lewis versus Tua kind of a one where he just can't compete, you know?
Yeah, I hear you. With Joshua's stamina, I don't want to call it stamina weakness, but if we're talking about weaknesses in Joshua, the two times he's looked vulnerable are the Dillian Whyte fight early on and the Klitschko fight after he knocked down Klitschko. And both times he's had rounds of immense low output where he's really given rounds away because he appears to be fatigued. Is there a possibility that a fighter like Carlos Takam, who is an endless come-forward merchant, who's going to put his head down and grind and grind and grind and grind, a fighter like that, could that fighter potentially be the kryptonite to Joshua?
Well, he might be, like, you know, if he can take the power. You know, Joshua, like, if there's a guy who can take Joshua's power, you know, like somebody like a Joe Frazier type style, you know, somebody who's tough and just comes and has some power. You know, I think a style like Joe Frazier could clean out Joshua, to be honest with you. You know, a high-grade, attacking, you know, aggressive fighter could clean him out because, you know, Joshua has obvious flaws. You know, it's what kind of makes him exciting too. It's like what makes Adamir Khan exciting is that, you know, he could gas at any time, or we used to think he was chinny, but maybe he's not so chinny now. But I think he can go down, but he can get back up. You know, so a tendency maybe to get caught a bit. But you know, I think it's just an interesting fight. Like, I'm just looking down through Takam's, you know, his box right here. I'm looking to see what like his best win is. You know, like a Tony Thompson who was like what 40 something.
Tony Thompson.
He got him.
I hate to say it, but it's probably the draw against Perez, isn't it? Which isn't even a win.
Yeah, it's clearly that, you know, a draw against Mike Perez, you know, kind of puts it into context. And maybe, you know, he was a bit unlucky maybe to lose against Joseph Parker. You know, I don't know what the scorecards were in that, but
it was very. Yes, very. Looking at that, I remember that Perez fight because I had a bet on it. It was a 10-round fight. Perez schooled him for 5 rounds, gassed, and Takam easily won the last 5 rounds. It was the easiest draw you'll ever score. It was so clear, 5-5. Then the Povetkin fight, I had that fight even at the time of the stoppage, and you know, Povetkin's obviously had some PED controversy subsequently, but Povetkin absolutely iced him. As for the Parker fight, I think the majority of us would probably agree that the guy took at least 5 rounds off Joseph Parker. So for me, in what is a weaker heavyweight division, Carlos Takam probably is borderline top 10, I guess.
Yeah, well, he's kind of one of those guys that's fought maybe a lot of guys in the top 30, but he's only beaten like 1. So,
yeah.
You know, it's hard to make a, you know, they're like, you know, it's like a Hammer's win over Price. Is that better than an ancient Tony Thompson? You know, like, there's not that much difference between him and Hammer.
Yeah.
You know, he's probably better, but like, they're not radically different class of fighter. So, you know, I just, second highest ranked French heavyweight. Who the hell is their highest? Please don't say it's Tony. Oh, Duhapis. Okay. I thought it was going to be Tony Yoka. Jesus Christ. Did anybody see Tony Yoka's fight at the weekend?
No.
Oh, man. He's not any good. He is really boring.
He was poor, was he?
Oh, really poor. Really poor. He took like a journeyman with like a 7-2 journeyman. And he went 6 rounds, I think, with him. Didn't look close. I think he knocked him down once, but your man was just off target. And to be honest with you, I had him losing a number of rounds. And he kind of is. He's more negative. He's more negative than Hughie Fury. And he's got extremely low output. He's just he will not do anything in the heavyweight division. That's how much boxing I watched at the weekend. I watched Tony Yoka in a 6th rounder.
That's interesting. I might have to check that one out. Okay, interesting. Jay, let's bring you in. And I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not saying that this is my opinion, but I'm looking to make a discussion for all the listeners. I would say Pulev and Takam are probably the complete polar opposites in terms of styles. I would say you couldn't prepare for 2 more different fighters in the context of the heavyweight top 15. Is that a concern? You know, just that the preparation has all been about one type of fighter, and now we're going straight from one side to the other.
No, it's a terrible fight. It's an easy fight. It's done in 3 rounds. Easy. To come for me, you won't.
You'll take us to why?
Well, I just don't think he'll be able to. There's very few fighters that are going to be able to deal with Joshua's power, and I'm not a massive Joshua fanboy, but there's very few that can deal with it, and I just don't think Takam he's of that when I've talked to before about the, you know, the top end of heavyweights, the elite heavyweights, and then there's the next lockdown, and then there's the next lockdown. He's not the next lockdown. He's the third rate for me. And it's just I don't understand. I mean, I understand what Tom's saying about them being, you know, it's a good replacement, etc. And it is late notice and paying 50 grand to make millions and not to call off the fight. But for me personally, he said he didn't want to see Dillian Whyte. I would want to see Dillian Whyte. I'd rather fight than Carlos Takam, you know, because I don't think Carlos Takam has got the tools to beat Joshua. Joshua's just coming off a fight against one of the best heavyweights in the world, you know, and now he's going to Carlos Takam as a replacement. I mean, Dillian Whyte, if they put that fight together, both are training for fights, the money that would generate from that fight with Dillian Whyte, a rematch, would be mega. But what Eddie Hearn is doing, he wants to protect Dillian Whyte because he wants that shot at Deontay Wilder to set up that fight with Joshua later on in the year, in the future. That's why he's doing that. So for me, Carlos Takam does not cause him any problems, gets knocked out by Povetkin, gets a draw with Perez, and loses to Joseph Parker. Can anyone honestly say that he's going to last more than 3 or 4 rounds? I don't care. I don't care how tough he is. I don't care how tough he is. When he gets hit down the pipe by Joshua, he's going to feel it. And sometimes your mind might be a little bit stronger than your body. When your body,
Dillian Whyte went 7 rounds. Is he as tough as Dillian Whyte?
I'm not saying he's not, but I'd rather see Dillian Whyte because at least there's more about the fight. There's going to be better build-up, and from a financial point of view, it's going to make more money.
You're explicitly saying he's worse than Dillian Whyte. You said he won't go 3 rounds, beyond 3 rounds. Dillian went 7. Look, let's be clear. When Joshua stood up to the highest level, the higher levels, guys have been going 8 and regularly have been going 7 and 8 and 11.
So is Takam better than Brazil?
Yeah, I think he's a lot better than Brazil.
Yeah, he mightn't be as good aggressively.
Here's my take, right? Firstly, I do think Whyte versus Joshua is a big fight, and it needs more than 2 weeks promotion, and the guys need to train for each other. I actually am I agree with Irish Tom. I'm quite complimentary on the fight, given the lack of time. I actually think Carlos Takam is slightly underrated here. I don't for 1 second suspect he beats Joshua, and please don't misconstrue me from saying that. I do think he has the potential to ask Joshua questions we haven't seen from, have we ever seen Joshua put in a pressure situation against a pressure fighter who comes forward? Have we ever seen Joshua tested on the inside? I mean, Takam can potentially pose those questions. I think the other thing I'd say is Dillian Whyte. I would say Takam is a better fighter than Dillian Whyte. Dillian Whyte is a more dangerous fighter. And what I mean by that is I think Derek Chisora is a better fighter than David Price. But I think David Price is possibly more dangerous to a Joshua, because I think Joshua is so far above both of them in terms of levels that the fact David Price is bringing that devastating power to the equation, makes him a more dangerous fight, even though he's a lesser fighter than Chisora. So I hope that makes some sort of sense what I'm saying. I don't see Takam as a dangerous fight, but I do think he's one of the better tests available,
I just think Joshua, as you said, is head and shoulders above someone like Carlos Takam. He's heads and shoulders above him. And I don't care how tough he is, how he comes forward, how he's doing rounds. He's not faced anyone like Joshua. Because there is really, in that division, no one really like Joshua. And that's the thing. The fight that we really want to see Joshua in is Deontay Wilder. That's the fight that we want to, and Tyson Fury. Those are the 2 fights that we really want to see, because we know those 2 people have some sort of chance to beat Anthony Joshua. But I can't see Carlos Takam. It's horrible to go into a fight knowing it's a foregone conclusion.
Do you think Joshua just keeps Takam at range, Jay? Do you think Takam will just literally be at the end of the 1-2 or what?
Takam will go about his business like he always does. There's no side to him. He's not going to overnight become some sort of amazing stylistic boxer and mover, and which is what you need to fight, really, Anthony Joshua. He's not going to deal with a mover very well. There's very few in the heavyweight division, if any, really, bar Tyson Fury. Anthony Joshua, like someone will stand in front of him that he can just hit, and he can just wait up for the first couple of rounds and then go straight down the middle of the pipe. Boom. When he feels the power, that's when his legs are going to go. And Carlos Takam is perfect for that. He's just going to come forward and he's just going to get hit. And I don't think the power that Anthony Joshua brings, no matter how tough you are and how come forward you are and how resilient you are, you will give up. If you get caught clean, your body will give up. And I mean, I may be completely wrong, but from what I see, I honestly think that it won't go no more than 3-4 rounds. And you can say, well, is Dillian Whyte a better fighter than Carlos Takam? Anthony Joshua is not the same fighter that fought Dillian Whyte by a long shot, because he's been through fights afterwards, for one. For two, he's matured as a fighter. For three, he's had time to work in camps, etc. For four, he's fought Klitschko, which took him to the brink of every boxer when they get knocked down and they have to get up and they have to fight back in a tough championship fight in front of thousands of people. He's been there and he's come through it, and he'll be a better fighter for it. I don't think, you know, when you talk about the big names that Carlos Takam has fought, he's fought Povetkin, he got knocked out. For Parker, he nearly got knocked out and he drew with Perez. What makes anyone think that he's going to be a good test for Anthony Joshua?
Well, he's better than, say, probably Brazil and probably Dillian Whyte. Definitely Dillian Whyte.
But he's a different fighter now, Joshua. He's not the fighter that
1 year ago. He's improved so much since Brazil. 1 year ago, he suddenly
that fight with Klitschko would have took him to a different level. I guarantee you.
I agree with you.
Been to places that he's never been before, and not many fighters have. And when they go through that, then you see a true test of a fighter, because now he's going to think a little bit more. Now he's been in that position. Now he's going to go about his work a little bit more different because he's had that experience.
Yeah.
Josh,
that doesn't mean that doesn't mean that
you go.
It doesn't. Sorry, it doesn't mean that, like, just because you've gone through a tough fight doesn't mean you're better at all different types of styles.
I'm not saying that, but
well, you kind of are. Because you're saying like he's going to be universally better as a fighter. Like Takam might never put him into the position where he has to get up off the ground. So the things he's learned in that fight won't be applied in this one. So
has Takam really got the style to trouble Joshua? Really? He comes forward head first, straight lines, which is exactly what Joshua loves. He loves a fighter that comes in straight lines. Every fighter loves that. And stronger, younger. I mean, it's insane to think.
We all know that. Well, Dominic Breazeale, we all know, is a real slick fighter. He was dancing, wasn't he?
I'm not saying that.
Well, look at Joshua. Will it's not just a simple thing that because he bet Klitschko, he's now going to knock out Takam in 3. It would take 7 years.
I'm not saying that, but you add that to age. You add that to physical ability, you add that to punching power, you add all of those things up. You really tell me that Carlos Takam can cause him problems when Carlos
I'm not saying it causes him problems, but I just don't say it's a TKO 3. You're saying he won't go past 3. I'm saying there's a good chance he could get knocked out early, but I'm not saying. I'm saying the under and over on a non-crazy bet site, because everybody be going for Joshua knockout early because they're all fanboys. But a proper sports book, if it was picking the line, they wouldn't be picking three rounds. That's what I'm saying.
Unless Joshua wants it to go longer than 3, that's how it will go longer than 3. Simple.
Yeah.
Well, Takam is a tough man. He's never been stopped, has he?
Yeah.
Once. He never fought anyone like Joshua.
He got iced once.
He's never fought anyone like Joshua. Povetkin doesn't beat Joshua. Parker doesn't beat Joshua.
Povetkin is a power puncher. Povetkin's one of the strongest punchers in the division, and he went, 11, 10 rounds?
Won't beat Joshua, though.
Yeah, to be fair, Jay, I would say Povetkin and Parker are 2 top 5 heavyweights, and he has taken 40% of the rounds against both.
Yeah, but I think Joshua is above those 2 fighters. That's why I talk about there's Joshua and Fury, possibly Wilder, and then there's everyone else. And that's where it's at, and that's where it comes into the X factor.
I think you've both got very valid points. I completely, Tom, Irish Tom, if you're on the crisps, mate, could you mute yourself? The chat is making popcorn. What I'm going to say, so I agree with Jay to a large extent that I do believe Joshua will improve substantially for that Klitschko fight. I think the experience of that fight, the fact he's proven to himself he can take a punch, the fact he's proven that he can go 11 rounds, and the fact he's just got experience of operating at that level in a pro ring. I do think he's going to come on a lot for that fight. At the same time, you know, I also agree with Irish Tom that, you know, not only was this a mandatory fight, so Joshua in a sense had to take it, but also that, you know, Takam is potentially a good test. And what I will say is, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to be picking Takam in this fight. My pick for this fight, obviously I'll make a separate video, but I'll let you know now, my pick will clearly be Anthony Joshua. But what I will say is, if Takam is hard enough to stay in there for 4 or 5 rounds and absorb some of the punches from Joshua, and if Joshua gasses like he does in the Whyte fight or in the Klitschko fight, a guy like Takam who can just be relentless, come forward, sit on his chest, close down the reins, take the rein, you know, take the spacing away from him. Someone like that really could be the kryptonite. We've never seen Joshua have that sort of test. No, I think Jay's right about the straight down the middle. It may not get that.
What about Kevin Johnson, for instance? Now, this might seem a bit of a joke. Kevin Johnson had never been knocked out until he fought Anthony Joshua. He was the same age, fought good opponents. What makes and possibly stylistically a better boxer?
I would say it's desire, because Kevin Johnson is a better pure boxer than Takam. But let's be honest, Kevin Johnson fought Fury, didn't win a round. Fought Chisora, possibly didn't win a round. He started losing fights to opponents like Christian Hamer. You know, by the time he stepped in with Joshua, he was fully an opponent, a punching bag.
But had never been knocked out?
Yeah, Kevin Johnson is very durable. But Carlos Takam is more than just durable. Carlos Takam he's actually a guy who took 5 rounds off Parker recently. He's a guy who took 4 or 5 rounds off Povetkin recently. He took 5 rounds off Perez a few years ago. He beat Tony Thompson. He's a bit more than a Kevin Johnson in terms of his actual achievements, and he's still showing a will to win in there.
I mean, there is a big opportunity for him, Garrett, a massive, huge opportunity for him. But I honestly think the physicalities will just be too much. And I think it will be for most people, because, I mean, at the end of the day, say, for instance, the what's going on or was going to happen, you know, where would we have seen that going? Would we have seen Pulev getting beaten, you know, mid to late rounds? Or would we have seen it going the distance? Or would we have seen...
I think AJ would have knocked out Pulev quicker than he'll knock out Takam.
Well, this is what I'm saying, but Pulev is rated as you know, as one of the top 10 heavyweights in the world, you know, and has full good position.
But this is what I'm coming to. I think Pulev is a better fighter than Takam. But I think what Pulev does, standing in front of you, throwing a jab from range, would just be easy work for Joshua. What Takam is going to do, if he's able to do it, is bring a test that could be, it could be something different for Joshua. You know, I hate to use the styles make fight phrase, but are you honestly telling me you've got confidence that if Takam survives 3 or 4 rounds and then just comes with a high work rate on the inside, where's the Joshua fight that tells you he will definitely deal with that, I guess?
Because I don't think he'll get that far. That's my honest opinion.
AJ could just wipe him out in 30 seconds. It is possible. I don't think he will, but it is possible, I guess.
I think.
Sorry,
I don't know. I don't know. I can only, I'm only saying what I think will happen, but for me, I just don't see the movement or that's going to really trouble Joshua. Do you know what I mean? And size difference is a lot. Is a lot. And when you're getting hit by someone Anthony Joshua's size straight down the pipe, I just don't think your body can take it.
The key phrase that Jay said there is, I don't know.
No, it's not. It's not that. I can't. I will convincingly say that I've told you I don't think it will go 3 rounds. But Tom makes valid points that okay, yeah, it could, and maybe it could. But I can only. You're asking me now. I can only tell you what I think now. Truthfully, I'm not going to say otherwise.
Yeah.
So yeah, Carlos Takam gets beaten in 3 rounds.
Yeah. Interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in there. I think we're all in agreement that AJ is a very, very, very heavy favourite, and I don't think any of us are going to necessarily be predicting the upset here. One thing I would just like to say is about the size difference. I think when you're at a point where the size difference is so vast, and here, I mean, I've heard very conflicting reports about Carlos Takam's height. David Hayes said he was sparring him for the Chisora fight, and David Hayes said he reckons he's about 5'11". I've seen him online listed as about 6'2". So I'm not sure how tall he actually is, but let's say he's about 6 foot. I think when the size difference is so vast between the two fighters, to steal Dwyerism, fighting short can actually be beneficial. I mean, if you're going to be 6'1", you may as well be 5'11" and try and get low and try and fight like a short man and try and come under the jab and, you know, be that relentless bull in a china shop style approach. So I hear what you're saying about the size difference, but part of me is thinking that because he is so much shorter, maybe that's a different test in itself. But I am potentially clutching at straws. But there you go. Let's bring in someone far more sensible than the 3 of us. Let's bring in the professor, Jet. Jet, opinions there. Give us your take, pal.
I have nothing more to add to that chaos. That was manic. So,
which side of the fence do you sit on, though? Or are you somewhere in between?
It's not a bad fight. You know, mate, for 2 weeks out, very good fight to make. You know, so I don't really have a problem with the fight. But Joshua wins, regardless. It doesn't matter. Joshua will win. I know he's been training for a different style and prepping for a different style, but, you know, he's a world champion. He's been to the top of the game against Klitschko. Should be able to adapt. You know, if he's the top of the game, he should be able to adapt and adjust accordingly. Takam's game, you know, might cause a few problems depending on how it turns out early. You know, Joshua is very explosive in the first sort of 4 or 5 rounds. After that is a bit of a mystery. So, yeah, I'd expect him, if he can get into range and he can get his work off, I expect Takam to give him 1 or 2 problems, but, you know, nothing too significant. And I expect Joshua to come through and carry on to unify the division possibly next year if the fights are available.
In terms of Takam himself, look, I don't think any of us are saying Takam's going to win the fight. Are you of the opinion that this is a fight that will probably be a knockover job, or are you of the opinion that this will be more like a Brazil fight? You know, it'll be one-sided, but could go a few rounds, could ask a few questions.
Yeah, probably the latter. I think Takam is game. He's shown, you know, fairly decent chin, very good chin, apart from the Povetkin on drugs sort of, you know, saga. But, you know, he's traditionally shown a good chin, and I'd expect him, you know, I know he's small and whatnot, but I'd expect it to go at least a few rounds, you know, at least 5 or 6 rounds, I think. He's the sort of guy that's going to come in. He's got nothing to lose. Let's not forget that. He's going to come in and just give it his best shot. He'll make a career high payday off the fight as well. So, yeah, best of luck to him, mate. I think he'll be in there, you know, maybe cause a problem or 2, but it should be pretty much Joshua plain sailing. And, you know, the height difference may just be easy work for AJ, and he might just make it, you know, fairly easy and coast for maybe at least 4 or 5 rounds. Maybe it's possible because obviously he wants the fans to get their money's worth. So, yeah, we'll see. I guess we'll see, but I'd expect AJ to win fairly comfortably enough, I guess.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Jet, before we re-enter the melee, let me serve you up Robert Helenius versus Dillian Whyte. Again, you guys know I'm an Eddie Hearn ass kisser. What a good fight for the notice.
Yeah, the same video said that the Eddie Hearn interview that went up a couple of days ago said that obviously they were in talks. Helenius was going to fight in November sometime in Finland or something like that. So they phoned Eddie back and said 2 weeks ago and said, is the Dillian Whyte fight available? So obviously Dillian Whyte's been in camp, he's been in training. Helenius has been in camp, has been training as well. So it's not the worst late notice fight. I mean, obviously it's late notice, but they've both been in camp. It's not like it's just they're given 2 weeks notice and that's that. So it's a good fight for the WBC silver title, if I'm correct. So obviously that will give the winner a very high ranking in the WBC, possibly number 1 ranking, because obviously Wilder's fighting is mandatory in Stiverne. So good fight. For Dillian Whyte, it's the toughest fight of his career, I'd say. Obviously he's lost to Joshua, but aside from that fight, it's the toughest fight of his career. Helenius, it's the toughest fight since he's come back. Obviously he's had promotional issues, injury issues. He lost to Duhaupas, and he should have beaten Duhaupas if he was up to much, but seems like he's slightly regressed and still showing problems with his stamina and that sort of stuff. Looks to have some snap in his work in the first few rounds, but it seems to fade away and fizzle away quickly, and as the fight progresses. So the only thing is Dillian Whyte. I've been going over this fight constantly. If Dillian Whyte comes in and approaches a boxer's sort of mentality in this fight, I can't see him winning this fight. If he comes in aggressive, how he did in the early sort of portion of his career, I think he's got a good chance of winning the fight. But if he comes in as a boxer, I can't see him winning this fight. Helenius is tall, he's rangy. If he keeps it at a slower pace, then he can keep Dillian Whyte on the end of his jab. Dillian Whyte's jab can't be better than Helenius's. He kind of pushes it out and throws it awkwardly. So it's a tough fight. It depends what Dillian Whyte shows up, to be honest.
You see it's 50-50, or do you make? Are you seeing it's a 50-50, or do you make Whyte a favourite?
I'm seeing a lot of people saying Whyte is going to absolutely smash him, but I don't know. It's for me, it's the mentality, it's the tactics, how he approaches the fight. I mean, obviously his last few fights, he's been approaching the fight with a kind of boxer first mentality, if you get what I mean. Obviously, he fought Malcolm Tan out in the States. That was a bit more different. Obviously, he was expected to win that. It was a routine run out. And as I said, it would have been good to see the Marius Wack fight. Obviously, that one got cancelled. Was it in June or something like that?
Yeah.
So that would have been a really good sort of gauge, because Wack isn't. I don't think he's as skilled as someone like a Helenius. I'm not saying Helenius has got ridiculous skills, but seems to have better fundamentals than Wack. It would have been a good test to see where Dillian was at. But for me, it's a tough fight to call. It depends what Dillian Whyte turns up, to be honest. If he approaches a boxer's first mentality, I think he'll lose. If he comes in and tries to rush Helenius' stamina is not the greatest for a big man, 6'7", 6'8". I'd like to think that Dillian Whyte would win if he was gonna rush Helenius. But as I said, 50-50 depending on what Dillian Whyte shows up, what condition he shows up in also, and Helenius.
Yeah, I think that's not far off, and I think the public perception on this fight is very, very different to my perception. The bookmakers, you can get somewhere between 3-1 and 7-2 on Robert Helenius, and I may well have a look at those odds. I think this is an underrated fight here. Thank you, Jet. Jay, Tom, let's bring you both back in. Jet and I thinking that Helenius Whyte could be very, very competitive. Are we right or are we wrong?
I think it's a difficult fight for Dillian Whyte. I think that's a 50-50 fight.
Interesting. Jay?
Yeah, I think it's a good opponent for Dillian Whyte at this point. I think it's the test that to see the measuring stick of where he's at, and whoever I take it will go on to face
Wilder.
Yeah, I think they'll go on to face him. So yeah, it's a tough fight. It's a tough fight. I think Dillian Whyte will struggle because how tall is Helenius?
He's listed as 6'. I think he's more like 6'8".
So yeah, it's never going to be easy for Dillian Whyte fighting someone that big, I think. So yeah, it's not really a fight that really excites me, to be honest with you.
I think that's really interesting. So all four of us are saying 50-50, yet the bookmakers have Helenius at 3-1. You know, and what's quite telling is both of these fights have been made at short notice, right? If Whyte beats Helenius,
that's the headline. That's the headline and the.
What, Tom?
Sorry, Gossip. Sorry, I was going to say, is that Joshua and Takam and the chief support have just been made in 2 weeks' notice?
Correct.
That's pretty well. The Dillian Whyte one is disgraceful. 2 weeks' notice for a big fight like that. That's a number of times on these undercards where like the opposition, and one of them for a mandatory. What was the one? Was the one against Luke Campbell? Was that the last one where Yaman got like 3 weeks' notice for a mandatory for the WBC or something like that?
Do you mean a final eliminator?
Final eliminator, yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. But what I was going to say is what's strange is they've both been brought in for 2 weeks' notice, right? If Dillian Whyte wins his fight, it's the biggest win of his career, as far as I'm concerned. If Joshua wins his fight, it's the second biggest win of his career. So, you know, it's like short notice, but big fights. But potentially, the fact it's such short notice takes away from the achievement. I mean, if Dillian Whyte goes and smashes up Robert Helenius now, look, I don't want to be negative on anyone, but part of me is going to think, oh, is that to do with the fact he's got such short notice? You know, I guess we'll have to see what kind of shape he's in come fight week, I guess, right?
Yeah, so maybe they know that he's not in good shape. But, you know, they're heavyweights. They don't need to cut weight. And Helenius, whatever Helenius has, he always has a big punch. And he jabs straight. And Dillian is not a mover. So, you know, I think, well, he's not terrible on his feet, but he's not a great mover. So, you know, it should be decent.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a heavyweight bonanza because, look, I know none of us, look, and I know people scoff at this being on a pay-per-view bill, but Lenroy Thomas versus David Allen is a 50-50 fight. Helenius versus Whyte, in my opinion, is a 50-50 fight. Joshua versus Takam is certainly not a 50-50 fight, but it is Anthony Joshua, who is, you know, a global phenomenon now, I guess. So if you like your heavyweight boxing, you're going to be tuned into that bill one way or another. Let's put it that way. Guys, we'll keep it moving because obviously we'll discuss the Whyte fight and the Joshua fight again closer to the time. We've still got a hell of a lot to get through actually in this, so we've dragged our feet a bit tonight. So let me rattle through a few news topics quite quickly. I'll shout them out. I'm not going to go to specific panelists. Anyone who wants just jumps in. First and foremost, and Jet mentioned this topic, which I thank him for because I neglected to include it. Errol Spence versus Lamont Peterson has been made. What are your thoughts on that fight?
Dave who? Sorry, say that again.
Errol Spence versus Lamont Peterson.
Spence against Lamont Peterson. For me, Spence wins that.
Good fight or run of the mill for Errol Spence?
I think it's yeah, it's not a bad fight. I think they're probably waiting for it. I believe Thurman's back now, isn't he?
Yeah.
Probably a tie over till that fight comes in. You know, it's not an easy fight, but I think that's the fight I want to see personally. I don't know about anyone else.
Yeah, it's a huge fight. I do actually like the Lamont fight though in between. I think that's a a really respectable test. Anyone else? Jet, Tom, any comment on Peterson versus Spence?
Spence should win.
Good fight.
Good fight, though. Yeah.
Do you think Lamont Peterson could cause him any difficulties from range yet?
Possibly, but he is very small. I think, even for welterweight, light welter, he was fair size, but I think he's a very small welterweight. So, probably not the problems that Kell Brook posed, but maybe one or two, as I said. It'll probably be a decent enough Spence win. But it's a good test for him to keep going until, Terence Crawford is available, or a Keith Thurman unification as well.
Okay, good stuff. Paul, who sadly doesn't look like he's been able to join us tonight on the podcast, he sent one up. He said he believes that Garcia versus Linares has been mandated. Is that true, Jack?
I haven't seen that, mate. I was looking for that for a good half hour before we went on air, and I haven't seen any news of that at all whatsoever. Yeah,
I haven't seen that either. So with Paul's absence, perhaps we'll leave that to his return, and he can reveal his source at that point. The other thing I wanted to say was I saw a rumour online today, and I believe this is strong rumour, that Billy Joe Saunders versus David Lemieux is headed to Canada.
Already made.
It's been made for Canada, has it?
Yeah, December 16th.
Yeah, and that doesn't surprise me because Lemieux is a big money fighter, and I don't know whether or not he's going to want to. He's going to want to attend a a half-empty copper box. Yeah, so it doesn't surprise me. But do we give Billy Joe Saunders a bit of credit for this? Then Lemieux's a decent middleweight, and he's going to his backyard.
You have to, mate. You have to. Billy Joe obviously talks a lot, and David Lemieux has been talking on Twitter. So, it looks to be it's classic boxer versus sort of puncher, isn't it? David Lemieux is a big puncher. He's had a good year as well. So, typical. And it's a mandatory, so should free up Billy Joe. I picked Billy Joe in that fight, but it should free him up to, have some sort of unification fights or other big fights, Danny Jacobs and those sort of fights, if they come about. Should be able to do that after this mandatory.
Good stuff. Yeah, I think it's a really, really good fight. And if Billy Joe Saunders wins that, he's got a decent resume. If he's got a win over Lemieux, Andy Lee, and Chris Eubank, that is a very, very, very decent resume. So I give him a hell of a lot of credit when that fight happens. And that's a real competitive fight. I give Billy Joe an edge, but that is one you could describe as a 50-50, I guess.
I think it's a good fight. I think it's fight he needs. He needs that set fight, doesn't he, again, to keep that momentum, to look for that golden chalice that he seeks from Golovkin or Canelo.
Definitely. And I think it will only help to build his name in the States. And Lemieux's a name over there. So
yeah.
Let me just touch on something very briefly. And I don't want to discuss it in too much depth because we're here to discuss the boxing. But on this podcast, we've discussed a few times crowd problems in boxing. And that topic has come up several times recently. And unfortunately, it's probably hit a new low this weekend. There was an incident at a hall show in Walsall, I believe, that has been highly publicised. A few people from Facebook have contacted me about that, and it's been reported that there was a death at the event. There was also footage on the internet which was allegedly from the George Groves Jamie Cox crowd at that fight. It really, really is becoming quite a topic. This, I mean, it's becoming something that's coming up on a weekly basis. Surely the promoters need to, and it's not one promoter. It's not anyone's fault. It's the idiots in the crowd who can't control themselves. But surely security needs to be ramped up for the shows for the rest of the year in light of recent events.
I'll tell you what they need, Gossip, is they need most of these boys are coked up, they're taking a load of coke and they're drinking probably 15 pints. You know, they put sniffer dogs. Like, did you see the tweet like of ringside of one? Was it the Ricky Burns one? And the boys like dabbing themselves with like giving their mates whatever MDMA or coke from their pocket, and it's like, you know, put sniffer dogs on the outside and like get some cops there with sniffer dogs, and it'll make a big difference.
Yeah.
You know, these boys.
I'm not going to call out specific promoters or call out specific fights, but I will say that I have seen, with my own eyes, I've witnessed a lot of drug taking at boxing events in the past.
Yeah, and it's not any in particular. Like it's across the board. You know,
it's just boxing fans. Yeah, you know, it's not that boxing fans who goes to Anthony Joshua fights are more likely than, you know, but it's boxing fans. I have seen online some speculation about a drinking ban at boxing. Now, I would find that very unfortunate because I'm someone who loves to go to the fight and have 3 or 4 pints and, you know, not get involved in a scrap afterwards. So it is a shame when the actions of the minority spoil it for the majority. But, you know, is that something that we need to, or the sport needs to be considering?
Well, you know, I think, you know, you could... Look, the problem for me is that these guys are going to football matches. Typically, they're going to football matches at 12 o'clock or 3 o'clock. They're taking a load of coke. They might have even been out the night before. Because they're taking coke, they're able to have fucking 15 pints and they're keep able to go. And then they're there and then they just kick off. Like Tommy, the guru on the boxing asylum, his father got his orbital bone smashed.
Irish.
No, but his father was at one of these ones and he got his orbital bone smashed. That just shows you, like, the guy is like, what, 60 or something. And, you know, he's getting some guy decking him. You know, you don't have to be even looking for it to get it. On a related note, I've been doing some trolling on this exact matter. Would anybody like to hear it? It's ongoing as we speak. It'll only take me a minute. It's very amusing.
Something that's going to make me need to take the podcast down afterwards.
It won't. No, it won't.
I think it will. I think it will be.
No, it won't. You can take it down. I guarantee it won't.
Yeah, I just not to take it down, having spent the last 2 hours recording it. You know, like I really
Irish.
I'd rather not.
Well, no, there's nothing bad in it at all.
Why don't you type it into our private chat, Iris, and then we can give it a yay or a nay.
Seriously, just let me tell it. I mean, we'd have done it by now, and it's not even controversial. It's not even controversial. It's just trolling. I thought it'd be amusing for our people.
Oh no.
Okay, I won't do it then.
Is it an amusing subject?
It is amusing, though.
It is. What is the subject? That's what I'm saying.
Somebody tweeted Eddie Hearn and said, "What time is it acceptable to start drinking next Saturday?" And Eddie Hearn replied, 11 a.m. And I replied to him, "Good to see Eddie is not encouraging the kind of drinking that leads to fights and blackens the name of the sport." And this guy replied to me, and his Twitter picture is the Real Madrid kind of banner logo or whatever. And he said, "Encouraging, lol. If grown adults can't handle a drink, it's not his fault, you troll." Which I replied to him and I said, "I find it astonishing that the official Real Madrid Twitter channel would attack me and call me names for simply airing my opinion." Never fell for it. He said, "If you believe you're being attacked after being called a troll, you must hate social media." I replied to him and said, "Imagine if you were if you were called a dragon or an elf, how would that make you feel?" It goes on in that kind of line.
Gossip was so news that he done the Deontay Wilder hands up dodgeball action.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. But for me, it is a very serious topic because I am one of these where
I think it's really true. Like,
I don't want booze to be banned at boxing, you know, but it really is. Like, you're right to say that you don't necessarily need to be looking for trouble to find it. And the other thing is I've been at boxing events where I've witnessed fights and the melee has got so large so quickly, you know, that you're seeing people going flying, you're seeing bottles going flying, and you can actually be sat 3 or 4 rows away and you can be affected by it. And, you know, that's, again, I come back to a comment I raised last week about do you take your missus to the event? Do you take your kids to the event? You know, and it's for me, it's becoming a difficult question to answer that.
I think, you know, with football, it was very similar some time ago, where, you know, alcohol was really prevalent, and the trouble was there. That's why the fences came. Everyone was sitting down, and fences came up, etc. And they banned alcohol from football for a time, and now it's reintroduced, and you can drink in the ground. You can't necessarily bring your drinks to your seat. You have to be in the bar, and what they do at football is literally the bar is open for 40 minutes, and that's it. And you can't buy any drinks in between that at half time, 40 minutes, and say an hour before the game, 40 minutes before the game. The problem being is with boxing is that what's diluted football is that there's a lot of families, a lot of kids, mums and dads, you know, and that kind of dilutes the crowd a lot when it comes to trouble at football, even though it's still there. The thing is with boxing, it's an adult thing. It's at night, so people can drink all through the day before they get there. So banning alcohol at an event is really not really gonna stop it, because they can drink moments and then get into for the main event literally, you know, 20 minutes before. It's a very British mentality. It's a very pack tribal mentality that you don't necessarily see in other parts. So when I've been to like sporting events in like baseball and basketball and things, it's just completely different vibe altogether. It's just very, very different. I just don't think, you know, stadiums, or well, not stadiums, but these arenas are not really set up correctly, or how they should be, to avoid these violence. You know, there's nothing separating one side of supporters from another. You know, you're all mixed in together, and a few words and a bit of gear and a drink can instantly change the whole tone of the people's experience within that arena. But I certainly wouldn't take my miss to a boxing match now, not at all, you know. And as I said, when I went to the second Fox Groves fight, I'd never seen anything like it, even at football, even at really bad football games that I've been to. And I've been to, like, I'm a Villa fan, and I've been to a lot of Aston Villa, Birmingham City derbies, which are renowned for trouble. There's always trouble at them. But at literally Fox Groves, as I said, people were pissing like just anywhere. They were just standing up and taking a piss and getting pissed, and half of the people were watching the fight, and there was people collapsed in corners. You know, it was not regulated in any sense, but I don't see how going forward we really can stop it.
Well, do you know what? Like, I tell you what, go to Glastonbury. There's fucking less drugs in Glastonbury than there is at a boxing match. That's the fucking truth of it. It's like, even a small hall show a small hall show in York Hall, and you go in there and you're like, fucking state of these guys, 8 o'clock in the evening, Friday evening, and they're coked out or bin. They look like they've had about 20 fucking pints already. I'm telling you, it's really there's a real big coke problem.
That's the problem. It's very difficult to police, because you can't really.
You put a few sniffer dogs. Put sniffer dogs on the entrance.
But
it'd save a lot of fucking thing. It'd take a lot of the drugs out of it.
If you've got 10,000 people, do you know what I mean? And say,
seriously, all those boys are bringing in coke. You can be sure all those boys are bringing in coke with them. They are. They're just bringing in wraps of coke and line of coke.
But you cannot search every single person. It's just not.
You don't have to serve with a sniffer dog. A sniffer dog will fucking smell a wrap of coke, no hassle.
Even then,
it just put the shits up, guys. It just put the shits up, lads. Lads wouldn't be bringing it.
You'd be afraid. People ain't scared of getting caught for drugs nowadays.
They're getting nicked.
Yeah, what, you're going to get nicked?
Lots of people want to get.
Everyone's had a fucking possession charge. Fucking hell, man. Let's just slap on the wrist, go to the police station, off you go. See you tomorrow. End of.
Yeah. I don't know what the answer is, but it's depressing. And, clearly it's a tragedy when people are getting hurt, and in certain cases worse. Going to view a sport they love, and for me that's the tragedy of it. But it is going to start having an effect, and there are certain events now where you do wonder if ticket sales are affected. And it does have the potential. I honestly believe this. It does have the potential to affect the future of the sport, because we're in an era where major broadcasters are dipping their toes in boxing again. You know, guys like ITV, guys like BT Sports. You know, these are companies who haven't been involved in boxing in recent years, and they're not going to want to be associated with, you know, events where, you know, horrific things happen. And thankfully, that hasn't happened just yet on one of their shows. But, you know, I guess the George Groves Jamie Foxx fight was broadcast with a major broadcaster, and, you know, it makes it a real difficult topic for me.
I think it's a matter of time, because when the government will start getting involved, when something really major happens and the government start cracking down and putting on legislations and rules about how these things should be done, then it's going to cost promoters a lot more money to have security at these events that are capable of dealing with these issues. And as you said, major sponsors like, you know, cut clean sponsors don't really like going near boxing anyway. You know what I mean? So what sponsors you do get will start take their money away, and something definitely needs to be done, because it will be the detriment to the sport, not what happens in the ring, outside the ring.
Well, look at like in the 90s and the late 80s, early 90s, like the last time the boxing promoters fell asleep at the wheel when all these guys got injured and died in the ring and stuff, and that led to all the boxing going off terrestrial television for numerous years. And that was because of promoters didn't want to pay the money to have the ambulances and the doctors ringside, and they didn't look after the fighters, and that devastated boxing. It made it go to the pay-per-view model, and now all those guys that used to get big sponsorships and big household names, they don't exist anymore. Bar once in a blue moon, you get an AJ. And then the other thing is, like, look what happened in soccer in the 80s when you had the Heysel Stadium thing, when the Liverpool fans, I think, rioted, and was it the Juventus fans got killed when the wall collapsed? You know, it's going to take something like that at a boxing match. And what will happen is, if it happens at a boxing match and something kicks off and 7 or 8 lads are killed in some kind of melee, like, what will happen is then boxing could actually get banned. You know, it's an unpopular sport enough with a large section of the society. You know, so, you know, this is like kind of, you know, it's a small risk, but it's an existential risk. And, you know, to be honest with you, you know, I don't know if it's like, you know, I think boxing has always been pretty dicey. Go back and look at Marvin Hagler fighting, was it Minter, when he won his world title, and all the bottles of abuse been thrown in the ring against him, you know, all these BNP motherfuckers. And, you know, so it's not like it wasn't going on in the 70s or back in the past, but like the other sports, soccer, they've done what Jay said, they managed to clamp it down. But the thing is, the money's not in boxing. You know, there's not a huge amount of money in boxing for these promoters. It's not like the soccer, which is like billions of pounds. Boxing's a small niche industry, and if they have to have databases and fucking horses on cops and horses and all this shit, they could actually stop a lot of shows happening.
Yeah, it's a real issue. And as I say, if I think back to the last 10 boxing shows that I've been to, there has been a major incident at the majority of them. And that's just my experience as a boxing fan.
Mine too.
And that's not an exaggeration. I'm not saying it's been every time, but if I think of the last 10, the majority. But anyway, look, as I said, didn't want to dwell on this topic too long. It's obviously not a nice topic and probably not what people are tuning in to watch, but you know, it's clearly going to be a big topic in the sport, and I do think it's going to be a very relevant one if it continues for the future of the sport. So that's why I wanted to raise it, I guess. Let's move on. Let's talk about next week's boxing. There's a hell of a lot of boxing actually going on. A real busy weekend. Let's start with Joyce versus Lewison. For Joyce's debut. What are we saying on that?
KO 6.
Or
I don't think he had that.
4.
KO for Joyce.
I go KO6. Yeah, KO4 for Jet, is it?
No, are you saying you're picking Joyce to win by KO or Lewison?
So Joyce, it's going to be easy. He's going to be easy. He's going to kick the shit out of him.
Okay.
Yeah, I think Joyce probably by stoppage, but later on in the fight, maybe like 7, 8.
Interesting. Jay?
I don't know really. I think it's hard to tell because we don't know what Joyce is going to do, what he's going to bring, or and what sort of shape Lewis is going to be in. So I think it's quite interesting to find out. Though I couldn't really pick it at this point in time.
Lewison looks in pretty good shape from what I've seen of him.
Well, that's definitely going to help him because that's always been one of his big issues, hasn't it, in the past? So I think he'll be quite motivated for it because it would be quite, even though it's Joyce's opener, I think it'd be quite the scalp for him and put him on a page really where people might take a bit more notice of him.
I'm going to give Lewison a 40% chance in this fight, 4-0. I think he's a very live dog.
I'll give him 42.
Wow.
Oh, come off it, lads. Seriously, you're giving him 40%.
Yeah.
He's been sparring Bermane Stavern and giving him everything he could handle. You think he's going to fucking, according to Ian Lewison? Him.
What, Stavern or Joyce?
Joyce.
Yeah, well,
he said he beat the dreadlocks off him.
I was sparring Anthony Joshua last week, mate, and I looked really good for the majority of the rounds. I thought I had the beating of him, to be honest. But it's different
because you've got diagnosed mental health issues.
Yeah, but you're not wrong. But I think Lewison, I do not understand where, if you look back at that Joe Joyce, Tony Yoka problems, Joe Joyce, to me, is a good fighter, but looked like he had the potential to be a one-dimensional fighter. Looked like he had the potential to be outboxed. Joyce to me looked basic at times. I think the Juggernaut is an effective nickname for him, because that's what he is, a Juggernaut. Guy like Ian Lewison, I think Ian Lewison can outbox him. I think Ian Lewison can catch him clean. I would not be surprised whatsoever if Ian Lewison wins this fight. And in fact, I'm going to stick my money where my mouth is. Look, if you put a gun to my head and said, who's going to win this fight? Your life on it. I'd pick Joe Joyce as a percentage call. What I'm saying is Ian Lewison is available at 8-1 with more than one bookmaker. I honestly think Ian Lewison is a very, 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 very live chance in this fight.
Well, I think you on drugs.
Indeed. What is it? Rob, good question in the chat. Have you ever watched Joyce? He's basically.
I've watched him amateurs.
What do you think? I mean, do you think he's like a Jarrell Miller or a Derek Chisora? What do you think he's going to bring?
He's 6'6". He's got a great engine. He's got a granite chin. He punches like a mule, and he's fit as a fiddle. He's been sparring with top guys. Lewison is 6'1". He's going to be 19 stone. 14 stone of that's going to be fat and cartilage. What's there not to like?
Skills.
He's been fighting in the World Series of Boxing against a way higher level. Like people say, he got schooled by Usyk. But I watched that fight. I didn't think it was. He lost it on an amateur fight, but he did fine against Usyk. And Usyk's supposed to be this amazing guy, and that's Joe Joyce from 4 years ago or something. If he's able to I just think he's. You can look at a guy. You can look at George Foreman, and you can look at him and go, God, his technique is desperate. But he's got other attributes. And I think we'll see them. David Hayes, no mug. He's not putting him in there against a top guy, a tough thing unless he thinks he's able to do it. Especially because, David Hayes tried it with Carl the Cat Thompson, so he knows what he's about. He sparred numerous times with world-class existing heavyweights,
Let me ask you this, then. You yourself said Tony Yoka is worse than useless. I thought Yoka beat Joe Joyce fair and square. Yoka outboxed.
He didn't beat him fair and square. You're in the minority that thought he won that. The vast majority. And look, I'm Irish, so I want to see every British fighter lose. And he clearly won that to me. You know, and I just can't, you know, I just think, you know, I just think he's a very good amateur prospect. He's, you know, Lewison can't go 12 rounds at the pace he's going to be put at. And he probably will struggle to take it. Are we just saying that because he did well against Dillian Whyte? Dillian Whyte hasn't got any of the attributes of this guy.
I think it's a 10 round fight as well, actually.
I think
it's 10 rounds.
Yeah, it's 10 rounds.
Yeah. Yeah, but like 10 rounds, you know.
I think what it is that because it's quite a surprising fight. We're not used to seeing, you know, a debut with someone so, you know, with of that standard. I think that's what a lot to do with it, you know, and maybe going the Vasyl Lomachenko way, you know what I mean, and going in deep quickly, you know, we can do, but they don't. They tend to just have these knockover jobs.
Especially when they have the WSB experience.
Yeah. I think
it's a game changer, and I think he had quite a lot. And I'm trying to check here now, see what.
Had a good 12-13 in there, Tom. Yeah.
You know, yeah, like so that's a lot. You know, and that'd be way higher level than, you know, to be honest with you, that'd be higher level than an English title fight, probably. You know what I mean?
Ian Lewison is a classy boxer. In the amateurs, and I'm going off memory alone here, so please forgive me if I'm wrong. I believe Ian Lewison beat Robert Helenius, Odlaner Solis, and David Price in the amateurs. Ian Lewison, a very, very, very high-class amateur. He turned over as pro. He's had discipline problems. You know, he's been out of the ring so much, and he's lost fights he shouldn't have lost, and he's turned up for fights in bad shape. But as Ian has said himself, you know, this is the first time he's turning up with enough notice. You can see in the guy's face when he's being like interviewed. You can see it now. He was interviewed today in the pre-fight workouts. You can see that physically he's in a totally different condition to what we've seen in his recent fights. And I just look at Joe Joyce, and you know, I know you say that I'm in the minority that you know, that think that Joe Joyce lost that fight to Yoka. I saw Yoka landing the smarter, cleaner, crisper work. I really did. I really, really did. I honestly think that. Look, I'm not saying Lewis is going to win. As I say, if you put a gun to my head, Joe Joyce is the most likely winner. He's got all the momentum. David Hayes obviously putting him in there for a logical reason, like you say. There are easy ways to pick holes in Ian Lewison's profile. But I don't see this as a gimme, and I think he could easily get found out here.
I think it's a slim chance. You know, I just think, you know, he's 36, hasn't fought in a year. You know, he's never beaten anybody.
Well, yeah. Well,
huh? And he's usually walking around the street at about 22 stone.
But if we're going with that, Joe Joyce is 32. He hasn't fought.
Yeah, he's an Olympic silver medalist.
He hasn't fought in a year, and he's never beaten anyone. You know, if we're going the same route, you know, like,
he's an Olympic silver medalist, and literally, I'd say if I listened to 10 boxing podcasts, the only person on any of them that thought he won that fight is probably you. Majority of people think he was a heavyweight gold medalist in the Olympics. Should have got it. I think he certainly should have got it. And you know, what are you going to do? Like, he's obviously he's fought and done well in the World Series of Boxing. You know, he's a tank. He's got all the physical attributes that Lewison doesn't have. Like, I think the chat is thinking you're trolling. That's
yeah, but it's a skills. You know, it's a skills thing. Look, I'm not saying Lewison doesn't fade late, and I'm not saying Joe Joyce doesn't come on strong. Yeah, but all this talk about Joe Joyce's engine, you know, based on what? Well, how many 12-round wars have we seen Joe Joyce in? You know, all this talk about Joe Joyce's power, you know, based on what? We're literally just guessing this out of thin air. What I'm saying, if we look at skills, if we look at the construction of punches, if we look at defense, I honestly believe that Ian Lewison is bringing a higher standard to the boxing ring. Now, look, Joyce is a bigger man, a younger man. He may well be a fitter man. He may well have a higher upside. He could
may well be fitter. You're having a laugh.
I've got no idea what Joe Joyce's fitness is. No idea. I've heard David Hayes say it's great.
Come on, have you seen him do capoeira?
Mate,
capoeira.
He's a 6'6" guy, and he's doing capoeira, and his legs swinging through the air like a fucking maniac.
My brother,
he's athletic.
My brother, Posh Gossip, is 6'5" and can do capoeira, but Ian Lewison would knock him out in one round as well. Let me tell you, that sort of stuff doesn't impress me.
You know what? It would impress me if your brother did capoeira. I would be impressed because he doesn't have it in him.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, what will impress me is when Ian Lewison slips one of Joyce's punches and jabs him square in the chin, and repeatedly does that. Don't be surprised. Look, I might look like an absolute mug here, but to be honest, I've made so many videos where I've looked like an absolute mug that it doesn't hurt after a while. So why not? Let's go with it. I can say Lewison wins this fight. I think Lewison will make Joyce look very bad for substantial spells.
But we can say it is a competitive fight, surely. One's got his pro debut, the other one became a lot longer in the sense of the professional game. So it is competitive, and it is slightly intriguing, surely.
Highly for me. Yeah.
I agree.
Definitely. Okay. Anyone got anything else to add on Joyce versus Lewison?
Negative.
In that case, sorry, was that a negative, Jay?
Negative.
Okay, let's talk about some of the boxing this week in Leeds, the Frank Warren card. Josh Warrington versus Dennis Kalen, Tyrone Nurse versus Jack Catterall. We'll start with Warrington versus Kalen. I noticed, or is it Salen? Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. I've seen the guy fight before. I noticed the bookmakers had Josh Warrington as a very substantial favourite. They had him like 1-8, 1-9. Dennis Salen available more like 5-1. I think this is a real competitive fight. I think this could again be a bit of a surprise. I think there'll be one surprise this weekend.
I think Salen's going to win.
Interesting. Based on the Ryan Walsh fight and the Isaac Lowe fight, Jet, impressed you there?
Yeah, I think he's he's obviously like a smart boxer. He knows what he's doing. He knows how to hold himself in the ring. He was European champion, and some European champions they're good at the standard they fight at. I don't think he's better than the world level guys, the Framptons, the Santos, the Mares, those sort of guys, Gary Russell. But he's competent at the level he fights at European level. And Warrington, for me, is I know he's improved a bit, but for me, he's bang average. His skills are limited. His punch variety is limited. I know he has the Leeds crown and he draws a lot of money, but Salen just looks the better. Just to have the better fundamentals, and I think normally the boxer beats the sort of pressure fighter, and Josh Warrington, I reckon, will try and bring the pressure similar to how he did in his previous fights, even on Sky. So, I'm going to go with Salen on points, I reckon. But then again, Warrington might get some robbery decision. So, I guess we'll wait and see. He got a dodgy decision against Amagasa, the 120, 108 or 107 or something like that. So, don't put it past Frank the Fiddler to do something dodgy with the cards and get Warrington a W. And that I think it's a final eliminator or eliminator for the IBF. So
yeah, it's a final eliminator for Selby's belt, if I'm not mistaken, mate.
Yeah, he beats them both for me if he can continue making the weight properly.
Interesting. Okay. Anyone else got any comment on the Warrington fight?
Well, I think Warrington wins. I think with the home crowd, as you said, with Frank Warren, I think he wins it.
Interesting. I view it as a 50-50. I think it's probably the toughest fight of Warrington's career today, actually. But let's see. I want to talk about a fight that I know at least one person in the chat is very keen on, and that person knows who they are. Tyrone Nurse versus Jack Catterall. Real good fight for the trade. You know, real 50-50 matchup here. Iris, correct me if I'm wrong, you're big on Catterall for this fight.
Yeah, I'm on Catterall for this fight. I think that he's going to run through Tyrone unless Tyrone is really on his toes. Tyrone has to fight on his toes, but I think Catterall will win this. I think he'll win it fairly well. I think Jack Catterall is a kind of an underrated fighter. He's probably maybe the next. I think he's up there with O'Hara Davies and these guys as the rung below Josh Taylor. But I think this is a good card. I think this is Frank's best card since Gervonta Davis came over. I think we've had a lot of poor cards in the UK recently, with maybe a decent headliner, but not a good solid card. This seems like a good card. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay, good stuff. Good stuff. I'm afraid I'm going to agree with Iris and actually say that I do make Catterall a favourite here, just based for me on upside. I really like Tyrone Nurse, and I'd actually like Tyrone Nurse to win the fight. I like his style, but for me, Nurse is a guy who has consistently made errors as he's gone up in levels, and I think Catterall appears to one of the two who is more obviously destined towards European sort of level. I think Nurse has it in him to improve, but I kind of question whether he actually will, based on the amount of fights I've seen where he's made the same errors over and over again. Catterall's blown a bit hot and cold, but recently he's looked really smart. So I'm going to give Catterall an edge here and agree with Iris. Jay, what's your take?
I'd like Nurse to win. I think Catterall will nick this one. I'm agree with you guys because, as you said, I think he's destined for bigger things. So I'll take Catterall for this.
Okay, Jet.
Yeah, I'd have to go with Catterall. I think depends what Tyrone Nurse turns up. If he, decides to be elusive and try and box, then he can cause Catterall a lot of problems. But if not, he seems to get drawn into tear up. He's done it with a couple of English and British level guys, and then he's done it with obviously Tommy Coyle and Maxi Hughes. Was it? I think he got the draw against Maxi Hughes or something like that, and or Joe Hughes, sorry. And I just think probably he's I wouldn't say miles on the clock, but I think Catterall's the younger, fresher fighter, and probably just pick him up. So pick him on upside and youth, and probably just being a fresher fighter.
Interesting. Okay. So we're united in Catterall, I'm afraid, Mikey. Let's stick with Jet. First ever unification fight to take place in either the Republic of Ireland or Northern Ireland, according to Eddie Heard. Ryan Burnett versus Zhakiyanov. I had promised to do my research, but life got in the way, and I will admit that I still haven't sat down and watched any Zhakiyanov. Jet, the bookmakers are favouring Ryan Burnett. Firstly, is it a good fight? Secondly, are the bookmakers right?
The bookmakers, that's it's difficult because they both beat good fighters in their last sort of fight. Obviously, Burnett beat Lee Haskins, who's a fairly decent fighter, and Zhakiyanov beat Raushi Warren. Warren's actually moved down to super flyweight, if I'm correct. So, they both beaten fairly decent fighters in the last fight. So the bookmakers, make of it what you will. I'd say just on sort of upside, maybe the eye test, Burnett probably just a slight favourite. So maybe they're right on that. Zhakiyanov, the fight is a good fight. It's not the barn burner that people are gonna, that the fans are clamouring for, I guess. But it's a good fight. I think it's a solid fight for the lightweight classes. If Burnett gets drawn into a tear up, then it might be, it might spice up. But I think Burnett will probably stick to his boxing skills and try and box on the outside and come in occasionally and try and catch Zhakiyanov. Zhakiyanov likes to come on your chest. He's a typical pressure fighter. He's very smart actually as well. He's trained by Ricky Hatton, and yeah, Ricky Hatton is one of the best offensive coaches. I think Irish said it on a podcast a few weeks ago, and I have to agree with him there. He's a very, very good trainer. So I'd go with Burnett, but Zhakiyanov could make it hairy at times. It's a good fight for his first defense and potential, winning of the belt. So I'd like to see Burnett do it. Get more bigger fights out here. Paul Butler's in the mix. I think Jamie McDonald's got a rematch against Liborio Solis. There's a few other guys there. Zolani Tete possibly, if they could make the fight on Frank and Eddie's side. So decent fight. Not obviously a massive barn burner and a casual draw, but will be a solid fight nonetheless. Some good action to watch.
Fantastic. Tom or Jay, any comments on Burnett Zhakiyanov?
I think I'll take this myself. I think we might be a little bit surprised what he can do. Even though I like Ryan Burnett, I think he's a very good fighter, very polished fighter. But I think Zhakiyanov he's quite underrated, and it's a chance for him to really prove if he's up to the standard that needs to be a titleist or a multiple titleist in that division. Starting for Burnett will really take him on to the next step really, with those two titles.
Interesting. Tom, anything to throw in on that fight?
I think that's a good fight. Oh, shite. Oh, yeah. Why was it? Can you hear me typing? Sorry. I thought I was muted. Yeah, I'm having some fun with some people on Twitter who don't know that I'm doing it. But I think that's a good fight, the Zhakiyanov Burnett. But, there's a lot of hype in Ireland about it, saying it's the greatest fight ever in Ireland, and it's unification. It's a lot of horseshit, really. It's two guys in the first defence, and Eddie likes to cheat. He likes to cheap unification. Zhakiyanov doesn't sell 5 tickets, and we don't know really his true level. But I think he's a decent fighter. I think Ricky Hatton is a great trainer. I think he's got a good chance, but he's not getting. I don't think he's getting that decision. That's the thing. It was a close fight. He's not winning it. But I think that the young Irish lad, what's his name again, Burnett. I don't think he's that good. And I think he's been in some tough fights at lower levels. That he's not going to last at the top level if he keeps taking punishment like he has so far.
I'll tell you what, boxing fans, if you value the opinions of this podcast, you should potentially take note this weekend, because Joyce versus Lewison, some upset potential. Warrington versus Salem, substantial upset potential. Nurse versus Catrell, some upset potential. Burnett versus Zhakiyanov, substantial upset potential. So, this could be a week where there are a few surprises. I would be very surprised if we sit here next week and all the favourites have won, because a lot of very close competitive fights and underrated fighters. World Boxing Super Series. Sorry, go ahead, Tom.
All-time Salem against, what do you call him?
Salem is 5-1.
5-1.
Yes,
wow.
Sir.
That is a big price. But, Frank will be protecting him, though. He'll have to win very clear decision.
Yeah. And Warrington has had some scorecards in the past, potentially when he was with
certainly has.
And
Frank. Did you not have a bad one with Frank against Kiko Martinez? Did he not win wide on one of those cards?
Yeah, the Kiko Martinez one. Yeah, you are right. Yeah. So I guess it's the Warrington crowd and Warrington being at home and being a home fighter, etc. But Salen, I don't believe he's the biggest puncher in the world. I think he's got 8 KOs from 18 wins. So he's really going to have to school Warrington. But there's some upset potential there, definitely. World Boxing Super Series continues, guys. I think we're all hugely in favour of it. Gassiev makes his debut in the tournament this week. Now, Gassiev, not a name the casuals will be familiar with. Someone who I myself would admit I haven't seen as much as I should have done on. But a lot of the hardcore boxing fans, a lot of the guys who live and breathe the sport, are very, very, very excited about Gassiev. And he's in a fight that looks like it could be pretty one-sided against, and apologies to the gentleman in question for my attempted pronunciation of his name, but Wlodarczyk. Gassiev versus Wlodarczyk. Guys, is there anyone here who sees anything other than a fairly easy win today?
I think it'll be a war.
You think they're just going to both throw down stylistically?
Yeah, stylistically, they're both sort of come forward fighters. They're not like guys who kind of feint behind the jab and move. They're guys who come forward, throw bombs, and have a tear up. So I think it'll be a really, really good fight. It'll be exciting. Gassiev is probably the fresher of the two, so I'd probably go with Gassiev just to youth and upside. And he had a really good win last time out against Denis Lebedev. So I'd say Gassiev probably just on youth and upside, and momentum as well. Wlodarczyk has he's had a few fights, but at lower levels. So I'd probably just say Gassiev, but good fight.
Interesting. So if you look at Murat Gassiev, I was surprised actually at how young he was. He was only 24 years old, which is like a real youngster in that division, I guess. Relatively high KO ratio. Do we see him going the distance against Wlodarczyk? Wlodarczyk's never been stopped before.
Very possible, but Gassiev is one of those guys. He, when he throws punches and bunches. I watched the Schimmel knockout on Twitter, and that was a brutal knockout. So he looks to, have some serious dynamite in those fists. Depends how Wlodarczyk's kind of aged, I guess. He's an older guy, and towards the tail end of your career, you don't want to be taking those heavy bombs. So it's difficult. Maybe a late stoppage. I'd say maybe a late stoppage or points. That's probably the bet for the weekend on Gassiev.
Good stuff. Okay. Anyone else got anything to say on Gassiev?
I think he'd just been the younger fresher, 24. I mean, how do you say his name? Wlodarczyk? He's had like what? Wlodarczyk's had 54 fights. 36 years old. Those clocks those miles on the clock have added up, and I think just the younger, fresher Gassiev, who wants to win this tournament, obviously, but and is possibly a possible winner of this tournament, will definitely dispatch him in good fashion, I would say. But it will be tough for many rounds.
Interesting stuff. One other fight that I was going to mention this weekend as well, purely because it's a rematch of a fight that was very, very controversial first time round. Jet, I remember discussing this with you at some point. Hassan Ndam versus Murata. Remind me, was your take that Ndam won by pure robbery?
Yeah, Murata, obviously, he was in his home country. I think Takam Promotions, they promote Linares as well. They were outraged at the decision. I felt Murata won, the majority of the rounds. And Ndam, we know what he is. He's a fairly competent boxer, bit chinny, quite upright. He moves decently, I guess. He's the lower tier of the the middleweight division. I'd say he's below the top guys definitely. And I just felt he got a robbery, to be fair. But rematch, Murata should win. He said he's looking to fight the Golovkin-Canelo rematch winner. So let's see if that fight can get made. Obviously, if he fights them, it's probably a career high payday. But for Canelo and Golovkin, they'll probably get a lion's share of the purse if he was mandated to fight them. I think it's for the regular title, if I'm correct. This one. So
Okay.
So yeah, it's for the regular title, and Dam holds it. So he's going back over there, I think, to fight Murata. I picked Murata in the fight, probably by points. I'd say points again. I don't think he's the biggest puncher, so yeah, points.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's very rare you see a fighter win a fight, take an immediate rematch, and still be available at 4-1 to win again. But I guess that's kind of a reflection of the perception as to how bad the judging was first time.
He was absolutely robbed. He was absolutely robbed in that.
He was robbed in his home country, which is
even
more ironic.
Unbelievable. I remember we did the podcast after that, and it was astonishing how bad the judges' scoring was for that. And then Dam, up until then, had fought, I think, a couple of fights in France. He'd had 2 good knockouts, early knockouts, but against no one. And in that fight, he was outclassed. He was well beaten, and it was just absolutely disgusting. And I don't think it will happen again. I don't think they'll allow it to happen again.
Interesting. I mean, it's very rare. Usually when someone gets robbed, it's like someone traveling away from home, someone who's an away fighter, someone who's just been brought in as an opponent. It's very rare that the opponent traveling away from home to a rival promoter's son wins by disgusting robbery. And I guess perhaps that tells us that it isn't always corruption. Sometimes there is complete and utter ineptitude. You know, I guess whilst there may be corruption, there's still a bit of space for ineptitude. Yeah,
it was one of those fights that, you know, you're watching the final round, you're thinking, right, this is in the bag, and then when the result comes out, you know, you scream at TV to say like that is, you know, a ridiculous decision. And I felt quite sorry for him because Murata was unbeaten until then, wasn't he? His 12th fight, I think it was, if I remember rightly. I think. So it was, you know, he was losing that winning record really, which he didn't deserve to do. So, and that doesn't sit well with me, you know, when a boxer, and there was a lot of good things being said about him, and he's a decent boxer. He's a very decent boxer. So yeah, it was his first loss, you know, and a way to lose after, you know, 12, 11 fights was just, quite sad, and he deserved better.
Indeed. Yeah. Okay. So that's another one to take note of. So it's the Joyce fight on Friday night, is it?
Yeah, it's on Friday night. Him, Michael Page, Willie Hutchinson, I think. So they're all on Friday night.
Yeah. So that's
as well. He's fighting. He's at Woodstock on that card as well. Or is he on the Warrington card?
No, he'll be on the Warrington. He's with Frank Warren, mate.
That's a good fight. That's the Poxon that beat Boy Jones Jr. That's a good fight.
Yeah, that's a good fight.
I'm looking forward to that. And I think Woodstock might be a little bit chinny. We'll find out.
Oh, versus Poxon.
Yeah.
That's a very good fight.
Yeah, that's a really good card. And that's 3 really good fights on that card. 3, like, I know the bookies mightn't have them as 50-50, but there are 3 really decent scraps on that card.
Yeah. So I've seen box live in the flesh. I know you're a fan, Tom. I know you're a fan. I think Woodstock is destined for higher things than Boy Jones Jr., mate. I think he's considerably better than that, if I'm being frank.
He's a good fighter.
Yeah. I see
fighter.
Woodstock being someone who, you know, who's a top 10 fighter in the world, that sort of level, you know, within his division, you know, he's someone who, I'm not saying he wins a world title, but he's someone who should get a world title fight. You know, he's a real talent as far as I'm concerned.
But was he not the one that we saw, like, the last time? Was he fighting for an English title or area title? And the guy really hurt him in the first or the second round, and his legs went. Was that not him?
Southern area title. Oh, no. Yeah, was it
Central area? Central area, I think. Was it maybe?
Southern area title. Yeah,
on the Leicester card. What was that Leicester card? What was the first Leicester card that Frank did?
He fought for the Midlands area super featherweight title.
Yeah, and then the guy... Huh?
That was the Langford Katzides card.
That's it. The Langford Katzides card. And he got caught in like the first round or second round on the ropes, and he ended up knocking the guy out in a couple of rounds, but, like, you know, a guy at a low level with not much history hurt him. So I'd be wary about his chin.
It's a fair point, Tom. I'm not going to disagree. I don't think he got banned. I think he just got caught. If you guys in the chat haven't seen Woodstock before, I would say stylistically very similar fighter to Chris Eubank Jr. Similar explosiveness, athleticism, puts combinations together, but like Chris Eubank Jr., quite raw when he turned over. And I think, yeah, some of that rawness needs to be ironed out. But I'd like to think he could beat Poxton. Good fighter.
Yeah. Good.
Cool. Jay, sorry, mate. Because your connection isn't great tonight, Jay, I keep cutting you off, but I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just because it's a bit stop-start, if that makes sense, mate. But were you trying to get...
Boycotting the podcast forever.
I feel bad because I think I've probably done it like a dozen times, but it's because your connection's a little bit in and out. It's like you go quiet and then I go, and it's, but
yeah,
that's what happens.
Okay.
That's what happens to me all the time. That's what I claim. But really, I'm just an ignorant bastard.
I'm worried what you're about to say. With Jay, it's a total mistake.
Yeah, I deserve it. What can I say?
I'm teasing. Guys, we've overrun substantially. It's past Jet's bedtime. Let me thank the panelists for giving up more time than was budgeted for.
3 hours, 5 minutes.
Yeah. It's been a bit of a slog. Huge amount of topics we covered tonight. Woo. Let me give a shout out to people who've been with us every second of the day. I'm seeing guys like Mikey, Team Groves. These guys were in the chat before it even started. So shout out to everyone like that. Let me also give a shout out to the 117 people who at this point have clicked the thumbs up button. I think that is potentially a record. So really massively appreciate the support. And if you're watching this after it's been uploaded, please hit the thumbs up button again and, continue to get this a bit more visibility. Let me do a quick whip round. I won't whip round the panel, I'll just throw it out there because we've overrun. Has anyone got anything more they want to add on any of the topics in boxing at the minute?
No,
I don't think so.
We've covered a lot of ground, guys, so it doesn't surprise me we've run out of topics. Well, in that case, I'll wrap it up. As always, as I say, subscribe to Jet's channel. And yeah, until next time, it's been a pleasure. Hit the thumbs up button, press subscribe, and leave a comment. Cheers, guys.